So video games are all about escapism and wish fulfillment, so it's rather understandable why developers have often made it a point of throwing in some insane features or weapons that are just too powerful for their own good. After all, is there anything more fun than rampaging through a game and feeling like a badass god? No, probably not. However, we have to admit that including such weapons and throwing balancing out of the window can have a huge impact on the game as a whole, meaning that in some cases, well, things get utterly broken. So let's take a look at them. As I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 overpowered weapons that broke video games. Number 10. The A280. Star Wars Battlefront 2. The most well-rounded and versatile go-to in the rebooted Battlefront series, the A280 is a blaster rifle that acts as the primary weapon for most Rebel Alliance players, and it is that balance that helps it absolutely dominate whatever battleground the players spawn in, be it online or off. Unlocked after bagging 50 kills with the Assault class, the A280's balanced approach sees it fire in 3 blast bursts, making it one of the most accurate weapons in the game. Its base damage is decent enough, and while it is certainly competent enough in the short and the long, it's the medium-range potency which makes it such a powerful weapon in the heat of battle. What's more, with a couple of additions, the A280's blast base potential can be maximized even further. Improved cooling and dual zoom upgrades can be attached to this weapon, helping players fire further, longer, and cover even more of their bases. It is the perfect all-rounder, and therefore players can always rely on the A280 no matter the scenario they find themselves in. Number 9. The Golden Gun. GoldenEye. Wielded by Christopher Lee's Francisco Scaramanga in 1974's The Man with the Golden Gun, the Golden Gun, as the name suggests, is a pistol made entirely out of solid gold. Now, Scaramanga and the Golden Gun have become two of the most iconic features of the James Bond franchise, a legacy that helped the weapon make its way into the rather acclaimed GoldenEye game on the N64. Originally only available in the side mission Egyptian after solving a hidden puzzle, the gun stands out for its distinctive appearance as well as being the strongest weapon in the entire game. However, through a couple of handy cheats, this completely broken weapon can be spawned in wherever the player requires it. With its 100 damage and 0 inaccuracy, the gun instantly kills any enemy it connects with, allowing players to slice through any potentially troublesome obstacles in a game known for having its fair share of them. There are only a handful of instances where the Golden Gun's auto-kill function doesn't apply, making it one of the most game-breaking weapons to have emerged from the entire 90s era. Number 8. Dawnbreaker. Skyrim. So anyone who's put even a couple of hours into the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim will have undoubtedly stumbled upon a strange-looking orb in a chest in one of the early game locations. The booming voice of the Daedric god Meridia and her now infamous and unskippable "A New Hand Touches the Beacon" monologue might be the source of infuriation to more veteran players nowadays, but it also grants access to one of the most overpowered weapons in the entire game. Completing her quest, The Break of Dawn, will see players rewarded with the sword Dawnbreaker, a unique weapon with a special potency against the undead. The sword has a base damage of 12, just 1 less than an ebony alternative, and can benefit from perks in the one-handed skill tree, and comes complete with 2 unique abilities: burning undead enemies for 10 points and occasionally causing a fiery explosion that will destroy any other undead baddies. Not only will Dawnbreaker make mincemeat of any low-level Draugr and vampires, but it's also a quick hack to overcoming some of the heaviest hitting classes and bosses that these undead opponents can produce. No weapon in the game has an ability like this, which, coupled with how difficult and common some of those Draugr bosses can be, firmly nestles Dawnbreaker in the game-breaking group. Number 7. The Knife. Wolfenstein: The New Order. So often in the world of gaming, the mantra of bigger equals better is often applied when it comes to producing the most powerful types of weapons. Whether they're based in the confines of the real world or not, these weapons usually deal in extravagance and explosions. However, Wolfenstein: The New Order is on hand to remind gamers everywhere that even a humble knife can pack a punch. The only melee weapon players can use in the game, what makes the knife so overpowered is how much it lends itself to a certain sort of playstyle. Capable of cutting down both enemies in full combat and stealthily taking them down from the shadows, the New Order's knife also carries with it an upgrade where players can acquire the ability to throw knives, a feature that will one-shot most enemies. The fact that players have the option of cutting through even the toughest of metal armors and insta-kill enemies through just a simple knife throw to the thigh is utterly hilarious, and is a definitely broken mechanic, but also is one which we're all too happy to take advantage of in our playthroughs. Number 6. The Pistol. Halo Combat Evolve. Master Chief, Halo's main protagonist, was designed to be the ultimate soldier and a complete badass. Therefore, it's fitting that at no point is this on show better than when he's armed with just a simple pistol. Halo Combat Evolve's M6D personal defense weapon system might look on the face of things as just being another typical starting FPS weapon, but anyone who has had the pistol in their hands will know all too well how truly powerful this can be. What makes Combat Evolve's weapon so iconic was how it utterly took took over the game's multiplayer modes. With all the fancy alien weaponry at their disposal, it should speak volumes about the pistol that most players found themselves being destroyed by such an unassuming weapon. Quite simply, the M6D brought it all to the table when it came to carving through enemies. Its damage was overall very high, especially against shielded opponents. Its firepower of roughly 210 rounds a minute is impressive, and the range in which it delivers its bullets also helped to make it so game-breakingly destructive. Number 5. The BFG 9000 Doom. The whole concept behind one of Doom's most iconic weapons is a fairly straightforward one for players to grasp. The big Gun 9000 has been in the series since the very first entry, and has carved out one of the most infamous reputations as a plasma cannon that shoots a giant green lightning blob capable of taking down any enemy in the game. These plasma blobs, 40 cells per blast, will continuously spark once fired and rampage across the screen, causing huge amounts of splash damage that will hit an entire group of medium demons and take them all out in a single go. The highest damage dealing weapon in the original Doom entry, the BFG 9000 will deal roughly 100 to 800 hit points worth of damage to any opponent that it makes contact with, resulting in up to 4,280 maximum damage being chucked out there. There are few things in gaming that can make someone feel quite as badass as frying hordes of denizens from the gates of hell in green plasma blobs being fired from the BFG 9000, allowing players to get out of even the hairiest situations without so much as breaking a sweat. Number 4. The Chicago Typewriter, Resident Evil 4. Now, Resident Evil 4 can be a tricky thing to complete, but thanks to the Chicago Typewriter, getting through the armies of parasites, monks, and commandos suddenly becomes an absolute breeze. It can take a bit of a grind for players to get their hands on the typewriter, with the weapon only being able to be purchased after they've picked up 300,000 points in the Assignment Ada minigame, but once the typewriter is in players' hands, the game's campaign firmly moves into the game-breaking territory. This weapon has infinite ammo, doesn't require any reloading, and mows down enemies with 100 damage points per second. The Chicago Typewriter is one of those weapons that players can tell has just been thrown in by the developers as a bit of wild fun during the late game development, but that certainly shouldn't dampen just how overpowered it is. The weapon made its debut in Resident Evil 4, and unsurprisingly, because of just how powerful it is, has not been included in the series since. Maximum damage, infinite ammunition, and the ability to bludgeon even the heaviest hitting enemies, the typewriter does a sterling job in bringing some chaotic carnage to this survival horror classic. Number 3. The Hidden Gun, Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. So Assassin's Creed Brotherhood gave players practically an arsenal's worth of new weaponry following its release, making killing enemies far easier than it had ever been in the previous 2 titles. The ability to poison, crossbow, or even get some plucky recruits to kill targets for you from afar were all well received. However, it was the revamping of a weapon that had made its debut in Assassin's Creed 2 that really pushed things towards game-breaking. In Assassin's Creed 2, players were given the ability to shoot a gun from their hidden blade roughly halfway into the storyline. This ability would require players to aim for about 5 seconds, however, making it a rather bad option in combat. But in Brotherhood, the weapon now fires much quicker and retains most of its overpowered damage output, killing pretty much any enemy in the game. Armies of enemies could be mowed down in successive one-shots without players needing to use more than just one button, and entire assassination sequences could be completely skipped over with just one simple firing of this hidden gun. So whilst the crossbow and poison darts do a similar thing, no other weapon in Assassin's Creed history has done so much damage right from the get-go. Number 2. The AMR, Far Cry 3. The tropical paradises of Far Cry 3's Rook Islands elevated the series to the heights that it continues to hit today, with the breathtaking performance from Vaas helping to push the gaming world into the cinematic masterpieces that gamers are familiar with today. And yet with the developers choosing to emphasize adventure and exploration, the game also produced a number of memorable items that allow players to feel like a wild killing machine. But none of these items or weapons comes close to matching the power that the AMR brings to the table. Available for players to purchase for just $4,800 after collecting 20 relics, the AMR is a variant on the 793 weapon, which is the best sniper rifle in the game. The AMR fires powerful explosive armor-piercing rounds and excels at taking foes down from long distances. It can kill a bear in one hit and take down a helicopter in just 2 shots, making it one of the most brutally satisfying weapons Ubisoft has ever thrown into the Far Cry series. It may be a little lacking when it comes to being subtle, however there's no denying just how broken the AMR can make Far Cry 3 feel when it's being wielded. And number 1, the Alien Blaster, Fallout 3. Undoubtedly the most powerful energy weapon in Fallout 3 and a strong contender for one of the most overpowered guns in the series' history, the Alien Blaster can be found at either Adams Air Force Base or the Alien crash site in the game. Instantly, what makes the Alien Blaster so game-breakingly overpowered in comparison to other weapons in the title is how a critical hit is always guaranteed whenever it's used. Most enemies will be killed in a single blow to the head, whilst even big baddies like Deathclaws are taken down in just 2 clicks with the blaster. Capable of firing up to 125 shots shots before breaking, the Alien Blaster also has the badass ability to fully disintegrate the enemies that it critical hit kills. The Alien Blaster can be considered game-breaking due to how, no matter the build or playstyle the player is going for when they load up Fallout 3, that they can always pick up this weapon and use it to mow down opponents. The Alien Blaster is just that damn good, and will make even the messiest of rampages work out. Now, no great action game exists without a killer weapon or 12, because if we don't feel tremendously empowered and satisfied while demolishing enemies, honestly, what is the point of even playing? Now, a weapon that's hugely fun to use can elevate a game from being good to absolutely amazing, but sometimes developers will end up cloistering some of their finest work away in paid DLC that is released a few months or even years later. So let's take a look at some of the best that we didn't mind shelling out for us. I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are the 10 best video game weapons hidden in DLC. Number 10. Atom's Judgment, Fallout 4. Now, Fallout 4 released a number of additional weapons in its numerous DLC expansions, though perhaps the best of the lot is Atom's Judgment. Atom's Judgment is an ultra-powerful variation on the Super Sledge melee weapon, which beyond dealing 40 base damage, also doles out at least 100 radiation damage per hit, and far more if you max out all your damage perks. As such, Fallout players were eager to get their grubby mitts on it and start cracking skulls. Yet, because Atom's Judgment was exclusive to 2016's Far Harbor DLC expansion, you first had to throw down around $24 to access it. And beyond that, you also had to complete the Children of Atom's faction questline, which at the end would finally gift you with this glorious heft of hammer. Now, this questline isn't particularly challenging by any means, but it is a little frustrating that arguably the most satisfying to use melee weapon in the entire game was released more than 6 months after the base game of Fallout 4, at which point many players had already moved on. Number 9. Ragnarok, Final Fantasy 15. If you shelled out for Final Fantasy 15's Digital Premium Edition or later dropped $24.99 to pick up all of the DLC packs in the game's Season Pass, you gained access to arguably its very best bladed weapon, Ragnarok. Ragnarok's big hook is that it's an incredible starter weapon if you paid out to unlock it. While it doesn't tout the most immediately amazing stats, it does allow you to administer hellacious amounts of damage by adding massive boosts to Noctis's warp strikes. Effectively, using Ragnarok made the majority of the game an absolute cakewalk, even trivial in parts, because it allowed you to largely just spam warp strike against enemies until they fell over. In fact, Ragnarok stacks the deck so heavily in the player's favor that some who purchased the DLC even opted not to use it during their first playthrough for fear that it would feel like basically cheating, and ultimately dilute the impact of the initial experience. Number 8. Eden Spark, Just Cause 3. When you absolutely positively need to obliterate everybody in the vicinity, except no substitute for Just Cause 3's Eden Spark, which is exclusive to the game's Bavarium Sea Heist DLC, which launched at a price of $5.99. The Eden Spark is an hilariously potent weapon that, when fully upgraded, borders on overpowered, albeit hilariously so. The game harnesses lightning from the sky to strike the desired target, with the impact of a direct hit being catastrophic enough that basically nothing in the game can withstand it. From fleshy NPCs to fortified structures, all will fall. As a result, the Eden Spark turns the player into a near unstoppable juggernaut. Every mission the game throws at you is now just a cinch, and the weapon's large target area makes it especially useful when liberating bases, towns, and outposts. Unlike Final Fantasy 15 though, one suspects few Just Cause players banned themselves from using this weapon, given that the series is pretty preoccupied with causing as much carnage as possible. Number 7. The Obsidian Greatsword, Dark Souls. Now, without wandering too deep into the very fiery debate about which Dark Souls weapons are truly the best, it's fair to say that many of the fan-favourite weapons are hidden away in DLC packs, including the first game's Obsidian Greatsword. Exclusive to the Artorias of the Abyss DLC, at a launch cost of $14.99, the Obsidian Greatsword's mileage may vary amongst players depending on their build, but between its high base damage, low stat requirements, and potential to deliver massive amounts of damage when buffed, it is one of the game's best dragon weapons. Yet, it's also a real pain in the ass to obtain, requiring players to not only flash their credit card and buy the DLC, but additionally defeat the hardest boss in the game as a whole, Calamite, and then sever his tail, which, due to being out of reach for most of the fight, is an insanely challenging feat itself. Nobody could really blame even a seasoned Dark Souls player for deciding that the Obsidian Greatsword wasn't worth all that hassle, but if they did that, they also missed out on an absolute corker of a weapon. Number 6. Tactical Weapons Bundle, The Last of Us. The Last of Us launched with an entertaining online multiplayer component known as Factions, which encouraged players to drop a few bucks on a DLC pack if they wanted to get a major leg up on the competition. For an admittedly measly $2.99, players could purchase the Tactical Weapons Bundle, which included 4 new powerful and precise weapons: the Tactical Shotgun, Burst Pistol, Frontier Rifle, and Crossbow. The Tactical Shotgun and Crossbow in particular gave those who owned them a considerable advantage over the have-nots, with the shotgun's ridiculous range allowing even lesser skilled players to easily rack up kills against unsuspecting rivals, while the crossbow made impacted enemies bleed until healed. Some considered the advantage of owning this bundle egregious enough that it basically amounted to pay to win, in turn prompting some players to vocally retire from the game outright. Now, $2.99 isn't a lot of money to most people, of course, but the notion that dropping a nominal amount of money can give you such a blatant advantage over other people in a competitive video game, well, that is just the worst. On their own merits, though, the weapons are fantastic, and it's a shame that they weren't ever implemented into the base game for free. Hopefully this might actually change in the upcoming remake, where they may be included in the single-player mode. Number 5. Foxblade. Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance. Players who pre-ordered Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance were granted access to the Grey Fox DLC, which not only unlocked a cyborg ninja costume for Raiden, but also the character's iconic Foxblade. But those who didn't pre-order could still buy it for a small fee. Yet even once you got the DLC, you still needed 200,000 battle points to purchase the Foxblade. Yet considering how comically powerful it is definitely worth it. Dubbed a cheat weapon by many, the Foxblade is similar to the HF Blade, except that it laughs in the face of armor, as each strike has a high chance of just no-selling armor and slicing through it like a warm pat of butter. And you can raise this chance further with some costly upgrades. Pretty much all non-boss enemies piss themselves in the presence of this weapon, which, while perhaps not the best blade for pulling off stylish and prolonged combos, is howlingly efficient at cutting down foes to size in record time. Number 4. The Sword of Transitus, Rage 2. Roughly 6 months after Rage 2 hit the market, to wildly mixed reviews no less, Bethesda released their second DLC, Terra Mania, for $5. The expansion introduced players to a new locale, known as the Deadlands, while most intriguingly allowing them to unlock a new weapon, the Sword of Transitus. Described as an ancient relic of unspeakable power, this sword can both unlock pathways between worlds and, more importantly, tear through foes of just about any size without much fuss. This is especially true once the sword is fully upgraded with an array of traversal and attack abilities, allowing you to dash around and render pretty much any combat encounter trivial. You're also able to use the sword in the rest of the game world from this point, including New Game Plus. Yet considering the relatively polarizing response to Rage 2 upon release, many no doubt wish the sword had been available since day one to help spice up the base game a little. Number 3. The M12 Locust, Mass Effect 2. Mass Effect 2's DLC pack Stolen Memory originally released for $6.99, and not only introduced players to Final Squad member Kazumi Goto, but also gave them access to one of the best weapons in the game, if not the entire series, the M12 Locust. You're able to use the Locust from midway through the loyalty mission, and it packs a mighty punch indeed. Now, this SMG is quite the triple threat, with its strong damage per second rate, low degree of recoil, and high amount of accuracy, ensuring that you can rip through hordes of enemies with far greater ease and precision than most of the game's assault rifles. This collectively mitigates its relatively low rate of fire, ensuring the Locust is one of Mass Effect 2's best picks for mid to long range engagement. It makes gunplay an absolute breeze, but most importantly, it is insanely fun to wield as well. Number 2. The Whirligig Saw, Bloodborne. We couldn't just limit this list to a single From Software game, especially with Bloodborne offering up one of the developer's all-time best-loved weapons, the Whirligig Saw. The Whirligig Saw is introduced in the game's Old Hunters DLC, and will let you turn just about any base game enemy into shreds of quivering meat. Its status as a trick weapon allows it to transform from a long-handed mace into a saw on a stick, the latter proving particularly satisfying due to the ridiculous amount of stylish damage that it can dish out. As strength weapons go, Bloodborne has no immediately superior options, and there's a firm argument to be made that it's simply the best and most effective weapon in the entire damn game. As with other weapons on this list, some purists ultimately opted against using it because they felt that it made the game too easy and prevented players from actually engaging their brain to defeat bosses. That said, rending a giant monster into pulled pork with a comically oversized pizza cutter is a gleeful pleasure that speaks very much for itself. And number 1, the fully upgraded Master Sword, The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild's inclusion on this list comes with a slight asterisk, considering that you can of course unlock the Master Sword in the base game, though if you want to upgrade it to its full potential, you'll need to play the Trial of the Sword DLC challenge mode. Beyond shelling out $20 for the DLC pack, the much tougher task lies in completing the extremely difficult Trial of the Sword stages, which are round-based battles against waves of enemies. To make matters worse, you start off with no equipment and must scavenge everything you can from various rounds, while checkpoints are only scarcely deployed throughout. If you reach and survive the final round, the Master Sword will receive a permanent power boost to 60, and its durability will raise to 190, and it will even glow blue. It is a pain in the ass getting to the end, but you'll in turn be able to clown just about anything this game throws at you, and it is very satisfying to do so. Now, video games offer the ultimate fantasy experience, whether it's by giving you an ultimate weapon that kills hordes of enemies with ease or a superpower that bends the laws of physics and time. The goal is usually to help you satisfy that rather odd urge for wanton destruction and carnage. In fact, some games are so generous when it comes to scratching your violent spot that they not only let you kill a bunch of goons and monsters, but also destroy entire bloody planets. The toys that they bring to the table go beyond the typical spectrum of devastation and provide some incredibly flashy, if not slightly terrifying, shows for us all. So let's take a look at them. As I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 video game weapons that let you destroy entire worlds. Number 10. Planet Buster, Fanatical Frenzy, and Gravitation Wave. Spore. Spore, the galactic life simulation, lets you create your own species and take it from being a single-celled organism in the primordial soup to an interplanetary empire of the future. The game offers you different paths on your way to the stars, and with them, a variety of options to end billions of lives all at once. The game features 3 space stage weapons that are capable of creating a planetary scale apocalypse. The first one, accessible to every empire in the game, is the Planet Buster, a powerful bomb that when dropped on a world will immediately explode its core and turn into a giant flaming ball of death. However, if you don't quite feel like absolutely destroying a perfectly habitable world, the game also includes a less catastrophic, though by no means humane alternative. Empires that follow the philosophy of science gain access to a powerful gravitational wave that raises all sentient life off the face of your future colony. And if you feel somewhat merciful, the philosophy of the Zealot offers you the Fanatical Frenzy laser that brainwashes every single alien on the planet into following your religion. Variety is indeed the spice of life, or in this case, mass destruction. Number 9. Hawley Engines, Planetary Annihilation. Planetary Annihilation is a fun, competitive, real-time strategy game where you try to defeat other planets by building up your economy and then destroying their bases with an army of war machines. If the name didn't give it away already, the game features several methods of griefing your friends by wiping their planets off the map. There are nukes and orbital strikes, and in the game's DLC Titans, well, it even has a full-scale Death Star added to the mix. However, the most entertaining method of destroying worlds has to be the so-called Hawley Engines, huge rockets that your construction bots can mount to a moon and propel it towards the nearest celestial body. Now, unlike the other options in the game, these engines require a little bit of setup and thinking, but this only makes the payoff all the more satisfying. Nothing beats sneakily pumping a moon full of rockets and then watching your Frankenstein creation of futuristic engineering and naturally occurring satellites ram itself into your opponent's homeworld at breakneck speeds, blowing it up into a million pieces. Number 8. The Nuke, Warzone 2.0. They say don't bring a knife to a gunfight, but what about a nuke? Though it's not something every player can pull off, Call of Duty Warzone 2.0 allows you to detonate an actual nuclear bomb in the middle of the match, wiping out the entire map and effectively rendering you the winner. The process of acquiring the bomb is rather tricky and requires a lot of skill from the player. Just to be able to spawn the bomb, you'll need to win 5 matches in a row, and anyone who's ever played a Battle Royale game knows that this is no easy task. If you manage to meet this requirement, your next task will be to gather 3 bomb parts that are scattered on the map, wait for the nuke to drop in a specified location, and then use the gathered elements to arm the device. Once the bomb is armed, the game will then start a countdown to detonation, during which you'll need to protect the nuke from other players. Now, the process will likely be a ruthless battle, but if you fend off the attackers until the very end, the nuclear spark of victory that follows, well, it is well worth the effort. Number 7. The Plague, Plague Inc. If you're looking for a more biological approach to total annihilation, Plague Inc. might be the right match for you. The game's entire goal is to wipe out all of humanity with a super virus, and it offers an impressive collection of mutations in order to help you achieve that. From the regular bubonic plague to a zombie virus and a mutagen that turns regular people into vampires, this game allows you to get really creative with how you go about bringing the end times. In addition, each bioweapon you create can be modified to be more resistant and infectious and transmit itself through air, blood, animals, and even avocados. However, the best feature of the game has to be the ability to name your disease. There's something morbidly hilarious about destroying all of mankind with a virus called, I don't know, Steve or the Fortnite fever. Of course, you can also go for the more realistic approach and wipe everyone out with a case of the common cold. Number 6. BFG 10,000 Doom Eternal. The Doom series has always featured the most violent and gory weapons in gaming history. However, although Doom Guy could probably cause global carnage with nothing but a spoon, only one weapon in his arsenal is capable of wiping out a planet all on its own. Making its debut appearance in Doom Eternal, the BFG 10,000 is a massive cannon located on the Phobos moonbase. The weapon was designed to fend off space armies and demonic invasions, and is actually powered by a smaller and slightly less destructive predecessor, the BFG 9000. Here, the Doomslayer uses it to blow a hole in Mars's core in order to gain access to an ancient city located inside it. This is the only time we get to see the BFG 10,000 in action, but this small preview is more than enough to feel its power. After the Doomslayer finds it, the smouldering hole that's left on the surface of the planet is a testament to the countless demon lives that you've just taken with one shot. And as a bonus, you get to keep the BFG 9000 powering the cannon after you use it for some more up-close and personal bloodshed. Number 5. The Death Star. Star Wars Empire at War. When it comes to planet destroyers, no weapon is more iconic than Star Wars' original Death Star. The floating metal orb is probably why the concept of blowing up planets with orbital lasers became so popular in the first place. If you've ever wondered what it would be like to wield the power of an actual Death Star, well, the 2006 strategy game Star Wars Empire at War is just the thing to sate your morbid curiosity. In the game, you get to play as either the Empire or the Rebels and expand their influence within the galaxy by building ships and fighting the opposing forces. Of course, if you pick the Empire side, one of the vessels in your arsenal is the legendary Death Star itself. The Death Star is capable of shooting smaller laser bursts to target individual ships and stations, but being true to its movie counterpart, it can also fire up a giant stream towards a planet to instantly blow it up. It can use its main burst only once per battle, but it is more than enough to completely crumble your opposition. Just make sure that there aren't any Jedi flying around when you bring this to the battlefield. Number 4. Planet Buster. Sid Meier's Alpha Centauri. The Death Star may have been one of the inspirations for most planet killers, but Sid Meier's Alpha Centauri, the sci-fi spin-off of the beloved turn-based strategy game, contains one of the earliest examples of a world-destroying weapon in video games, the aptly named Planet Buster. Now, the Planet Buster is a powerful quasi-nuclear missile described by the game as the future's ultimate atrocity. When fired at another nation's territory, it creates a black hole that destroys everything within a radius equal to the size of its reactor. This means that at its full potential, the missile is capable of wiping out entire civilizations with a single strike. The weapon is so deadly and dangerous that simply using it once will anger the Planetary Council. Your nation will immediately be thrown out of their ranks, and every single member will be dead set on destroying you. On the other hand, you don't really have too much to worry about, considering that, well, you're in possession of a remote-controlled black hole. Number 3. Obliterator. Endless Space 2. The Obliterator from Endless Space 2 is a marvel of engineering that the player can unlock towards the end of the military technology tree. It allows you to turn your big-class spaceships into a weapon of total destruction, a proper star killer. That's right, the Obliterator goes one step further than your regular world destroyer and allows you to blow up an entire solar system at once. Though the cost of researching the Obliterator technology is ridiculously high, the price is well worth it, as nothing beats the feeling of sending a system-destroying missile at your enemy's home star and then watching as the core of their empire goes up in flames. The best part is that the Obliterator has an infinite range, meaning that as long as you can see your target on a map, no part of the galaxy is safe from your wrath. Just remember, though, that you're not the only one who has access to this technology. Other nations in the galaxy can also make their own star killers, and if you're not careful, you might be surprised by your rival blowing up most of your empire from the comfort of their own home. Number 2. Graviton Condenser Star Ruler 2. Star Ruler 2 is a massive sci-fi 4X strategy game that includes a wonderfully intricate shipbuilding system, complete with weapon add-ons that allow you to destroy planets and solar systems. The Graviton Condenser subsystem is a technology you can unlock for your ships via your tech tree. It's a massive beam that causes a celestial body's own gravity to collapse in on itself, causing damage to the body until it detonates in a blinding flash of light and fire. The thing that separates this weapon from all of the other entries mentioned so far is that since Star Ruler 2 allows you to build ships of whatever size and power you want, you can technically assemble a graviton condenser so big that it could work on something even larger and more destructive than a star. If you're really dedicated, you may build a ship capable of exploding a black hole, or if you have a lot of time to spare, the center of the galaxy. But whether you seek to destroy everything or just make an example out of one of your enemy's home planets, the graviton condenser is certainly a powerful weapon indeed. And number 1, Colossus Stellaris. When it comes to total annihilation, the real-time strategy game Stellaris boasts the most impressive collection of weapons. The game contains 8 different types of planet killers, as well as a Star Eater ship capable of destroying entire solar systems by turning their suns into black holes. The weapons are special modules for the ginormous colossal type ship the player unlocks based on their Empire type. You have beams that blow up planetary cores, beams that drown the planet in an endless ocean, beams that pump it full of radioactive waste, and beams that devolve every single sentient species into animals, and that is just naming a few of them. The variety of global disasters the player can create on a whim in this game, well, it's truly staggering. But the best part is that with each new DLC release for Stellaris, the developers design another shiny new planet killer that adds another spicy way to turn the galaxy into a harrowing landscape of broken planets and billions of dead aliens.
Video game weapons tend to feel extra special when they're unique. The Master Sword from The Legend of Zelda and the BFG 9000 from Doom are iconic, not just for their immense power, but also because there's nothing like them in their respective games. However, there are certain guns, swords, or explosives that take exclusivity to the extreme, giving players only one chance in a playthrough to collect them. To stand the best chance of victory or achieving a 100% completion rating, make sure you track down all these precious video game items. I'm Jess from What Culture, and here are 10 powerful video game weapons you had one chance to obtain. Number 10. Flail of Ages, Baldur's Gate 2. There are a few weapons in Baldur's Gate 2 Shadows of Arm capable of turning the tide faster than the Flail of Ages. If players know exactly what to do, acquiring this beast is a breeze. First, they need to head to Diana's Keep and locate 4 specific flail components. After those parts are brought to Roger the Fence in the Temple District, he'll be able to forge this monstrous weapon. The Flail of Ages effortlessly cuts the enemies in Baldur's Gate 2 down to size, and it interrupts magic attacks, giving spellcasters little chance to fight back. While wielding this behemoth, not even the mightiest golems, dragons, or trolls should pose a threat. That said, it's really easy to lose out on the flail, due to a nasty boss called Torgal in the very last room of the keep. If you leave after he's defeated instead of searching out these components, the multi-headed flail is off the table permanently. Since there's no hint the weapon is only available for this brief window of time, it can be easily missed, especially on a first playthrough. Number 9. A321 Plasma Rifle, Fallout 3. If Fallout 3 players hope to survive in the post-apocalyptic wasteland, they should seek out the A321 Plasma Rifle as soon as they can. A single shot from this energy-spewing gun melts enemies in seconds. Because of its accessible ammo, heavy damage output, and large clip size, this plasma rifle has 0 drawbacks. Once obtained, there's little reason to select anything else while engaging in combat. However, this overpowered firearm is only up for grabs after completing the Replicated Man side quest. The mission involves locating an android called Harkness who's hiding from his creator, Dr. Zimmer. Although the quest isn't difficult or time-consuming, certain actions will have irreversible consequences. Because Zimmer and Harkness want different things, players need to decide who to side with. If you ally with the android, he'll offer up his plasma rifle. But if Harkness is sold out to his master, the A321 is out of the picture. Although siding with Zimmer offers other rewards, they're not in the same league as his amped up rifle. If you're eager to equip one of Fallout 3's best weapons, make sure you team Harkness. Number 8. The Hyperchip, Mega Man X3. In Mega Man X3, the titular robot can enhance his powers by picking up heart tanks, sub-tanks, and armor upgrades. On top of that, there are 4 pink capsules that boost X's abilities further. But there's a catch. Once the blue bomber accepts an upgrade from one pink capsule, the other 3 disappear. Which is a pity, since it would have been awesome if X could have accepted all 4 power-ups. Thankfully, there is a way, but only if X deliberately avoids the pink capsules. To do so, acquire every item in the game and head to the final stage. After defeating the first mini-boss, drop down the first pit and press into the left wall. If you avoid all enhancements, there's another secretive pink capsule, which endows X with the hyper chip. Not only does this upgrade make X's charged blast much wider, it lets him regenerate health, receive half damage from enemies, use less weapon energy, and perform a double air dash. Number 7. Ice Arrows, The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. After completing the Gerudo Forest in The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, Link gains access to a new area called the Gerudo Training Ground. As our time-traveling hero completes challenges inside this labyrinth, he'll receive a series of small keys. By using these keys on the facility's locked doors, Link will be rewarded with ice arrows, which can freeze enemies in place. However, acquiring these icy projectiles is anything but simple. Link has to be armed with almost every item to complete the training ground, including the Lens of Truth, the Iron Boots, the Megaton Hammer, and the Silver Gauntlets, all scattered across the game world. More importantly, there are 2 routes to reach the ice arrows, one sealed by 7 locked doors, the other by 8. Since there are only 7 keys to find, reaching the ice arrows becomes impossible if Link goes the wrong way. If this happens, it's not the end of the world, since the ice arrows aren't mandatory to complete the game, but it's still annoying to miss out, since ice arrows are the most powerful projectiles in Ocarina by a literal long shot. Number 6. Satori, Cyberpunk 2077. Firearms are a sensible choice of weapon in Cyberpunk 2077 since they allow V to keep a distance from enemies while dealing damage. Having said that, using a katana is kind of a lot more fun. Swords may not have as much range, but they make up for it in damage output since they can dispatch baddies at lightning speed, especially when performing a sneak attack. Rather than keeping the best goodies till the end, Cyberpunk 2077's most powerful blade can be located in the first act. However, it's important to emphasize the can part, since the Satori sword is only available for a small window of time. After Saburo is killed during the heist mission, T-Bug will command V to exit. Instead of following orders, V can take the stairs up to the roof, where you'll find 2 guards protecting Arasaka's AV. After defeating the goons, V will find Saburo's katana inside. Since the Satori deals 20% less base damage, it doesn't seem particularly effective, but it also unleashes 500% crit damage, making this mega sword utterly devastating for the rest of your playthrough. Number 5. Submachine Gun, Resident Evil Code Veronica. In Resident Evil Code Veronica, Claire Redfield can pick up 2 submachine guns reasonably early in the main campaign. With these rapid-fire weapons, Claire can aim at 2 targets simultaneously, allowing her to mow down anyone who crosses her path. But since we can't have nice things, the mopey Steve Burnside takes these firearms away from Claire shortly after. Because the SMG can tear apart zombies in seconds, it would have been cool to keep them. Turns out, you can. If Claire heads back to the military prison and gives a hemostatic to Rodrigo, he'll trade his lighter for her lockpick. This doesn't seem important at the time, but the exchange has a major payoff. Later, players take control of Claire's brother Chris. When he encounters Rodrigo, he'll offer Chris the lighter, letting the boulder-bashing agent unlock a set of machine guns in the catacombs. Even though there are still plenty of undead creatures to contend with, things should now be easier as you're equipped with 2 boomsticks. Number 4. Lance of Ruin, Fire Emblem 3 Houses. Unlike other entries on this list, acquiring the Lance of Ruin in Fire Emblem 3 Houses isn't an issue. The problem is keeping the infernal thing. After defeating Miklan in Chapter 5, protagonist Byleth will be able to obtain the prized spear. But after our hero returns to Lady Rhea, she'll take it away. This is a shame since the Lance of Ruin is an ideal tool due to its fast range, heightened accuracy, and immense power. If the wielder is in possession of certain crests, the lance can unleash an additional attack or critical damage as well. Also, it looks freaking cool. However, Rhea will allow Byleth to keep the jagged pole if Sylvain is in your party. By joining the Blue Lions, Sylvain will automatically appear on the roster. If the player isn't a member of this house though, they can still convince Sylvain to join, but only while playing as female Byleth. Sadly, the Lance of Ruin can't be permanently kept if even one of these requirements isn't met. Number 3. Iris, Golden Sun: The Lost Age. In Golden Sun: The Lost Age, our heroes can locate the Summon Tablet inside Anemos' inner sanctum. After acquiring this tablet, players can call upon the most powerful ally in the game, Iris. If summoned in battle, Iris will blanket the area in destructive light, which is pretty handy while facing some of the tougher bosses. Unfortunately, the door to the inner sanctum can only be opened after our heroes collect 72 little critters called Jinn. The problem is, the game only contains 44 Jinn, so what about the other 28? Well, this is where things get tricky. The Lost Age allows data to be transferred from the first Golden Sun by using a password or a game link cable. To enter the inner sanctum, players must hunt down every Jinn in the previous game, transfer the data to the Lost Age, and then find all the Jinn in this game too. If a single Jinn in the first installment is missed, the Iris can't be obtained. Sadly, many players had no idea they needed to fulfill these requirements to gain access to the inner sanctum, and as a result, few Golden Sun fans have had the satisfaction of unleashing Iris in battle. Number 2. Bolt of Gransax, Elden Ring. Elden Ring players can find the Bolt of Gransax in Leyndell after beating Godfrey. Once the Elden Lord is dead, players need to ride the elevator down, where they'll see a gigantic spear jutting out of the ground. This eyesore is the size of a building, so it's pretty hard to miss. Although the Bolt of Gransax rests on this spear, it often goes unclaimed, since the weapon can't be seen from a distance. Only by hopping onto the spear and exploring the top can the legendary armament be retrieved. The Bolt of Gransax is an astounding weapon, dealing plus 20% damage to dragons and plus 10% damage to ancient dragons. As a bonus, it can also unleash an electric projectile at enemies from afar. But since this is a From Software game we're talking about, fans knew claiming this godlike antique couldn't possibly be easy. You see, the Bolt of Gransax can only be gained so long as Malekith the Black Blade is still alive. Once he's defeated, the weaponized Thunderbolt vanishes into thin air. Unfortunately, most Elden Ring fans learned this tidbit the hard way. Number 1. Excalibur 2, Final Fantasy IX. On average, Final Fantasy IX takes almost 40 hours to complete, but to obtain the game's most powerful weapon, Excalibur 2, players must reach the gate to space in the final dungeon in under 12. Somehow, performing this feat is even less fair than it sounds. Firstly, you need to skip all side quests, meaning you miss out on helpful items and weapons. And because some battles can drag on through no fault of the player, resetting at the nearest save point is a must if a single fight takes too long. More annoying still, FF9's long-winded conversations and FMV sequences can't be skipped, and pausing doesn't stop the timer from counting down either. Worst of all, the PAL version of FF9 runs slower than the Japanese and American versions. As a result, those playing on a European system had an exponentially harder time acquiring the sword. Fortunately, the quest is much easier in the remastered version, since it includes a speed-up function. Nevertheless, obtaining such a godlike weapon is a tall order, and because the requirements are so tight, most gamers won't even bother, knowing they'll miss their chance forever once the runtime goes 1 second over 12 hours.
Is that it gives developers so much more room to come up with all kinds of stuff that not every player is going to experience the same, if at all. Tucked away in corners, in caves, or out to sea are some truly wild things to experience. If you're lucky, your exploration will pay off and you'll come away with some pretty incredible loot. I'm Cy for WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 insane weapons hidden in open world games. Number 10. Windshear, The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. When Skyrim released in 2011, it instantly became one of gaming's most beloved open worlds by being unbelievably deep. Countless quest lines set us off into the far reaches of the land, searching for adventure and stories to tell our friends about scraps with the ice giants or the crazy loot we found. Depending on how you played the game depended on what you might find out there. The Windshear sword can only be obtained if you take on the Hail Sithis quest, which means if you elect to destroy the Dark Brotherhood, then you won't get a chance to wield it. The quest allows you to board the ship to Kataraya. By climbing the boat and walking along its bowstrip, you can find the Windshear lodged into the wood. The Windshear is a single-handed weapon, but in order to make full use of it, you should be unequipped in the other hand so you can utilize its bash skill. What makes the Windshear so special? It can stun any enemy on either of its 2 swings for 1/10 of a second, from lowly skeletons to even dragons. Thus, if you're bold and swift enough, the Windshear can get you through most any battle the game has to offer. Time to go back and show that ice giant what for. Number 9. EXP Caliber Dying Light. Techland's Dying Light games feature a variety of of weird and wacky weapons that can be found in their open world cities to keep the games fun and fresh. One such piece of equipment is the first game's literal sword in the stone, EXP Caliber. XP Caliber? Exp Caliber, okay, I get it. From Fisherman's Village, if you swim out southeast from the mainland, you'll find a small outcropping of rocks in the ocean. Hidden from view is the Exp Caliber, impaled on a corpse, quite literally hoisted by his own petard. He won't part with it easily, and you'll need to hold down the button to retrieve it for a couple of minutes before you rob the poor guy blind. Don't rush away as soon as you grab the weapon, however, as waiting for a further 30 seconds gets you perhaps an even more vital reward. Suddenly the corpse will set alight, and where the body once was now lies the blueprints for the Exp Caliber. The sword is able to slice through most enemies easily enough, but it doesn't have a lot of resilience and it can't be repaired, which is precisely why you want to grab that schematic to build more. It may not be the most powerful weapon in the game, but it's definitely an unexpected delight for those taking a splash in Harren's shoreline. Number 7. Arendite, The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. In the original Witcher, Geralt lives out the tale of Excalibur and the Lady of the Lake by getting his hands on the monster-slaying sword Arendite. Canonically, our hero loses the blade in the prologue of Witcher 2 into the mouth of a dragon. A quest in the third game's Blood and Wine DLC, There Can Only Be One, allows the player to finally reclaim this lost weapon. The hermit guarding Arendite will only let those of chivalrous nature get their hands on the blade. Players who have completed other quests in the game that express their honour, wisdom, generosity, sympathy and valour can therefore satisfy the hermit's requirements. He will then challenge you to a one-on-one battle. To the victor go the spoils, and the Lady of the Lake hands over Arendite to Geralt and politely requests that he not misplace it this time. Arendite has a lot of awesome features that make it far and away the best silver sword in the game. First of all, striking with the weapon increases a charge by 10% each time, unless enough time passes or Geralt takes damage. When this charge hits 100%, the weapon will always land critical hits. Furthermore, Arendite gets more powerful the more you use it, meaning that enough time with the blade is sure to make it unstoppable. Number 6. Scorpion Gun, Halo Infinite. 2021's Halo Infinite saw the genre-defining FPS series take a big leap and plenty of risks. After some degree of staleness in its previous entries, Infinite brought Master Chief to his very first open world. Whilst the game does have the standard fare of Halo missions as part of its structure, players are encouraged to spend time on Zeta Halo rescuing UNSC soldiers, setting up bases, and hunting down alien scum. Unlike many of the game's special weapons, which are taken from notable alien war criminals, the Scorpion Gun is tucked away at the beginning of the game. After finishing the first mission and entering Zeta Halo's open world for the first time, climbing over the environment on the right with the grappling hook gets the player in front of 2 inactive turrets. Examining a specific point of the second one instantly equips the Scorpion Gun. This grants players immediate, infinite access to the turrets from the classic Halo Scorpion tank for as long as they want. Just don't swap your weapons, and you can run around the open world and enter missions with a tank turret on your head, firing blasts that can take down any enemy as well as banish dropships. A neat little Easter egg and a whole world of pain at your fingertips. Number 5. Magnapulsar, Far Cry 5. Some of the weirdest weapons in video games come from series that already have a very clear sense of humour, so it's not surprising that the Far Cry series contains several strange weapons. In Far Cry 5, conspiracy theorist Larry Parker can be found in the Holland Valley region of Hope County, and working through his questline will gain you access to his secret special weapon. The fourth and final mission, Out of This World, sees you defend Larry as he attempts to fulfill his ultimate goal of being sent into space. If you succeed, don't forget to check the containment field before you go for a little gift that the man has left behind. The Magnapulsar is high-tech and clearly not of this world. It also functions differently depending on range. From a distance, the device fires a wave of energy that pushes enemies and allies alike with great force, allowing you to ragdoll whoever is caught in the blast and or send them flying to their doom. Used up close, the vacuum instead just vaporizes the target in a cloud of red goo. An instant kill machine, provided you can get up close. It can also be used to handily destroy corpses in your wake to keep your enemies from finding them and tracking you down. Number 4. Loud Locust, Saints Row 4. Everyone remembers the Neuralizer from the Men in Black films, and if you don't know it by name, maybe that's because it was used on you. It's the device that wipes memory. The other reliable piece of equipment in Agent J's jacket pocket is the Noisy Cricket, a tiny weapon with one hell of a kick. Developers Volition decided to pay homage to this weapon with the Loud Locust in Saints Row 4. Head into the Let's Pretend costume store in New Baroneck and blow open the employees only door. Inside you'll find images of the game's development team plastered on the wall, which which explode into a shower of fireworks, and, sitting on the chair, the loud locust itself. This tiny pistol has infinite ammo and can cause all kinds of chaos with a simple squeeze of its trigger. It doesn't fire any missiles or any ammunition, just point and shoot and watch whatever you've targeted meet its untimely end. The locust does require a recharge after each use, and much like Men in Black, will send you flying backwards every time you fire it. Small and hilarious prices to pay for the insane level of destruction that this little friend can cause. Number 3. Ringed Finger, Elden Ring. From Software's idea of an open world is one where no matter where you turn, you're not that far away from a monster that wants to crush and maim you and can do so with minimal effort. Luckily, there's also plenty of goodies tucked away for players keen to explore, including the only weapon on this list that appears to be alive, the Ringed Finger. In order to give your enemies the finger, players must find the secret opening in Mount Gelmor to find Gelmor Hero's grave. Taking the elevator down to the Site of Grace and swinging a left, eventually you'll find a room filled with lava and a chariot enemy that can kill you on contact. Carefully dodging the foe into side rooms and then walking through the lava at the bottom to a hidden side room rewards brave players with a chest containing the Ringed Finger. As a hammer style weapon, it's slow to swing, but despite all this, it's well worth having the Ringed Finger on your side for its unique skill. The claw flick sees the finger swell in size, flex, and then ping your enemies into oblivion. It's decent at taking down poison, breaking defenses, and presumably scratching really big itches. Number 2. The Left Finger of Glover, Dying Light 2. Giant fingers are all well and good, but swinging such a thing at your enemies is unwieldy. No, sometimes subtle is better, and why use a grotesque giant's finger when you can hide a weapon inside your own digits? The Hands of Glover are a long-running gag that started in Techland's zombie action RPG Dead Island. As a nod to lead developer Bartosz Glover Kluon, the Easter eggs have continued forwards into the Dying Light games, first with the right hand and now with the left finger. After completing the Dying Light 2 mission Broadcast, you can scale the VNC Tower and from there jump to a specific skyscraper in the Garrison District. Once you land, there's a cabling puzzle to complete that requires making some pretty deftly leaps off the building and back in at lower levels until you can finally find and open a secret door. Inside the developer's room, you'll find posters of previous Techland games, a thank you note, and the schematic for the Left Finger of Glover. It costs a whopping 369 scrap to build and only comes with 16 shots, but there's something playfully entertaining about pointing at your enemies and watching them go boom. Considering the scarcity of firearms, when the need arises, it's nice to have something like this at arm's reach at any time. Get it? Arm's reach of... yeah. Clever. Number 1. Experimental MIRV, Fallout 3. Fallout's post-apocalyptic world is the result of nuclear destruction, so you'd think keeping people's hands off of nukes would be a generally accepted way to move forward. Finding the experimental MRIV takes some time, as first you'll need to locate the 5 Keller family transcripts that are spread across the wasteland. Each one contains a number that, when strung together, becomes a passcode to a room in the base of the National Guard depot. Good luck getting there in one piece though. The depot is a maze filled with hostile robots and gun turrets that make getting to the armory no easy feat. Once you do make your way inside, you'll find the experimental MRIV. As a unique variant of the Fat Man, it fires the same mini nuke ammunition and therefore does the same amount of damage per nuke. The major difference is that the MRIV loads 8 nukes at a time. Of course, dropping a nuke on any enemy in the game is overkill, but when overkill isn't enough, then drop 8 nukes. Considering that there's only 70 mini nukes that can be found in the open world of Fallout 3 and you need 8 at a time to load this weapon, the fun you can have with it is limited. It's also limited because you're pretty likely to blow yourself up with it. Turns out that nuclear weapons are not a toy. Who knew?
Now, one of the bigger reasons that people play video games is to enjoy a power fantasy that helps them just let off the steam of everyday life. And what better way than to give you that feeling of unlimited power than with a ridiculously strong weapon that can pulverize any enemy in seconds. But the problem is that the ones that we're about to talk about today also lasted as many seconds when you got to use them. So let's have a chat about them. As I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 overpowered video game weapons you can only use once. Number 10. Orbital Strike, Mass Effect 3. The science fiction world of Mass Effect is filled with terrifying weapons of mass destruction, but unfortunately, whenever Commander Shepard goes on yet another suicide mission, they only get to bring regular guns and a little bit of psychic power with them. That is, with the only exception being this special mission in Mass Effect 3, and this operation is the only time where Shepard gets to play with the big guns of their universe. More specifically, they get to activate an experimental orbital beam mounted on the Normandy. The laser is powerful enough to take down a Reaper, and that is exactly what what you'll find yourself doing here, ordering strike after strike to destroy one of the galaxy's greatest threats in very cool style. The sequence is done really well, as it maintains a sense of urgency and danger while simultaneously letting you have fun with your deadly new toy. The Reaper never feels weak, but dropping a huge laser beam into it, well, it feels very satisfying. Number 9. The Master Ball, Pokemon. Of all the random challenges, gym battles, and Elite Four gauntlets, the simple act of catching the titular pocket monsters is arguably the hardest part of Pokemon. Even the weakest Pidgey can be a handful when bad RNG lets it continue to resist getting caught, not to mention the many legendary monsters that are designed to easily avoid even the most expensive Pokeballs. That is, unless you have the Master Ball. A staple of the series, the Master Ball is a unique experimental Pokeball that allows its user to automatically capture any Pokemon, regardless of how many resistances it has or how many sassy fits that it throws. The Master Ball obviously works best against legendary Pokemon, and since you only get one per game, you might want to save it for capturing the toughest creatures. However, if you think your level 5 Magikarp deserves a better dwelling than a regular Pokeball, just remember that choice you made when Mewtwo dodged the 15th and final Pokeball in your inventory. Number 7. The Finger, Resident Evil 3 Remake. The weapons in Resident Evil are designed to make you struggle at times. They either take forever to kill something or consume ammunition at the speed of a vacuum cleaner stuck on its highest setting. That's why when Resident Evil 3 finally introduces the Finger, its supercharged laser beams feel like a refreshing and empowering change of pace. The aptly named Finger, or the Ferromagnetic Infantry Use Next Generation Railgun, if you believe the acronym isn't just a reference to what you give your enemies when you use it, appears in the final encounter with Jill Valentine's relentless mutant pursuer, Nemesis. This massive experimental railgun requires huge barrel-sized batteries to operate, which is why you can only use it once in the game. On the other hand, it's also why it's capable of instantly obliterating Resident Evil 3's toughest antagonist with just one strike. After running away from Nemesis the entire game, firing up the Finger and doing what even grenades and a rocket launcher weren't able to accomplish is honestly the most cathartic moment in the entire game. Now, if they ever design a hand-sized version of it, every future Resident Evil apocalypse will be over in mere minutes. Number 6. Golden Eggs, Resident Evil 4 Remake. Now, Resident Evil 3 might have its futuristic mega laser, but it's actually not the only game in the franchise in possession of a one-time super weapon. Resident Evil 4 also features a similar kind of destructive force, although it looks a lot less conspicuous than the prequel's counterpart. One of the collectible items in Resident Evil 4, a pair of golden eggs, can actually be used for more than a quick buck from the merchant. The eggs are secretly the weakness of the game's secondary antagonist, Ramon Salazar, and is capable of fully depleting his health in seconds. Yes, that's right, one of the main bosses in Resident Evil 4 can be destroyed using eggs. If you kept onto a golden one until the fight, using it is actually the easiest and fastest victory that you can achieve in the entire game. It's also the only victory like this, as the golden eggs don't have any real combat applications aside from Salazar's apparent allergy to them. They might be worth a lot of money, but on the other hand, the feeling of satisfaction you get from throwing an egg into a giant mutated monster and then watching it die horribly, well, it's just simply priceless. Number 5. Metal Gear Rex, Metal Gear Solid 4. Metal Gear Rex is a giant war mech that Snake was ordered to extract from Shadow Moses Island in Metal Gear Solid 1. Ever since its debut appearance in the original game, Metal Gear fans have been wondering what it would be like to actually pilot it, and luckily Metal Gear Solid 4 gives you exactly this opportunity. Not only that, but it also delivers the perfect boss fight along with it to make the occasion all the more special. In the final act of the game, as Solid Snake tries to escape with Rex from Shadow Moses Island, he's confronted by Liquid Snake, piloting another Metal Gear, Ray. This prompts a fight of truly epic proportions in which you, the player, finally get to experience what it's like to fight in the series' titular mechs. The fight with Ray is hard, but Rex's heavy artillery, on top of its size and weight that enable it to raise entire structures, makes you feel completely overpowered even when you're losing. The sequence is honestly so good that you can't help but wonder why Metal Gear doesn't just let you pilot its iconic machines more often. Number 4. Excalamune, Sunset Overdrive. Sunset Overdrive is an Insomniac Games weird mix between Tony Hawk's games, rail shooters, and zombie survival titles. As this brief description may have told you already, this game loves to play with ridiculous concepts, and its arsenal of weapons is great proof of that, because your character can wield a severed head launcher, a baseball bat / hammer hybrid, and the craziest weapon of all, Excalamune. Excalamune, a play on King Arthur's legendary sword and the name of a famous Japanese bladesmith, is a weapon truly deserving of its epic namesakes. It appears in only one mission in Sunset Overdrive, in which the player forges it in the flame of nuclear fire as a gift for their ninja cheerleader, soon-to-be best friend Esperanza. Thanks to its atomic creation, Excalamune is capable of destroying entire waves of enemies with one strike, and it has the ability to summon deadly flames and lightning bolts that deal additional damage and heal the player at the same time. Fighting with this weapon is a breeze and a joy, making you feel like a hero straight out of an epic tale. Unfortunately, the blade is eventually destroyed after Esperanza refuses to take it from you and breaks it before throwing you out of her safe house. I mean, come on, you could at least have given it back if you didn't want it. Number 3. Alien Blaster, Fallout 4. The weapons in the Fallout series can use some pretty wacky stuff as ammo sometimes. Throughout the years, we've seen guns that launch teddy bears, rail spikes, and bowling balls, but there's also one weapon whose ammunition is so weird and alien that once you run out of it, well, you won't ever be able to use it again. The Alien Blaster from Fallout 4 is a unique handgun that can be found near a crashed UFO site west of Cambridge. The blaster shoots unique blue projectiles that deal more damage than any other laser weapon in the game. However, the source of its power comes from special alien rounds that can only be looted from the gun's previous owner. Thanks to its relative proximity to the starting location, you can actually get the blaster pretty quickly and even kill the toughest of Fallout enemies with ease. Unfortunately, once you run out of ammo for it, the blaster's awesome power is gone for good. You can technically still use it if you replace its magazine with a regular laser pistol one, but it makes it significantly weaker in combat. Patrolling the Commonwealth with this modded variant will only just make you wish for an alien invasion, so you can get some more stuff. Number 2. Rune Powder Barrel, Baldur's Gate 3. Barrelmancy, the art of stacking copious amounts of smoke powder barrels and then lighting them on fire, is a trend that's been alive and well in Baldur's Gate 3's community ever since the game's alpha days. There's just something innately satisfying about defeating hordes of goblins or avatars of actual gods with an industrial quantity of explosives. However, if hauling around dozens of barrels doesn't sound like the plan for you, there's actually an item that possesses the destructive power of 24 smoke powder barrels at a quarter of their weight. But the only catch is, you can only use it once. In Act 3 of the game, if you help the Iron Hand gnomes escape from Moonrise Towers, their leader will ask you to blow up the foundry of his clan's rivals using his special creation, the Rune Powder Bomb. This hulking heap of magically infused gunpowder is capable of dealing over 100 damage to everything within 18-meter radius, making any encounter, even in the late stage of the game, laughably easy and beautifully explosive. Yes, you're technically supposed to use it for a quest, but who could resist that single glorious moment of instantly obliterating an entire battlefield? And number 1, the Bow of Light, Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. One of the more annoying parts of Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is the short durability of pretty much every weapon in the game. Even the most powerful equipment will eventually break and crumble away, which is why it's especially painful that one time you get your hands on a deadly and indestructible bow and you can only use it in the final fight with Ganon. The Bow of Light is a unique legendary bow that Princess Zelda gifts to Link at the end of the game in order to help him destroy his arch nemesis. It has an attack power of 100 and shoots special light arrows that explode on impact. Using the bow during the final encounter makes you feel genuinely overpowered, as even a single shot from it is capable of taking away a huge chunk of Ganon's health, and it makes for a rather satisfying and climactic end to your quest, although you do kind of wish that there was another way to keep it around after the fight. After all, maybe if Link had had it on himself at all times, Ganon would think twice about even coming back in the first place, because yeah, I wouldn't want to mess with that.
As we all know, video games, most of them anyway, change over time. They respond to fan bases, bugs hopefully get squashed, or in so many other ways we seem to discover on a daily basis, what you bought really is a series of zeros and ones constantly shifting form week to week. One part of that then is weapon balancing, and what better way to rework with authority than with a sequel. I'm Scott from WhatCulture.com, and these are 9 overpowered video game weapons developers removed. Number 9, Sawed-Off Shotgun. Gears of War 3/Judgment. When a game has a large multiplayer component, balance is an integral part of the experience. For Gears of War 3, the multiplayer was, for a time, completely dominated by players wielding sawn-off shotguns, as the weapon was extremely overpowered and in the right hands could down someone in one hit. Of course, this meant that the delicate balance of the multiplayer component was in danger. Players were becoming increasingly infuriated with being blasted in the face by sneaky shotgunners, and Epic had to take steps. The shotgun was nerfed after that game's release, reducing the range of its spread. This meant that shotgunners had to get closer to inflict the high levels of damage they could have done previously from much further away than what you'd expect with a shotgun. In Gears of War Judgment, the sawn-off shotgun remains in the game, but its incarnation compared to the original in Gears 3 is significantly less powerful. In Gears 4 and Gears 5, the sawn-off shotgun is completely removed, yet to make another appearance in the series. Number 8. Crash Bandicoot 3's Wumpa Fruit Bazooka. If you were about during the 90s heyday of Crash Bandicoot, how amazing was it when Crash 3 handed you an actual flippin' bazooka that you could use to shoot enemies with Wumpa Fruit. However, as mind-blowingly brilliant as such a weapon was for Crash to enjoy, it was also ridiculously overpowered. It meant that you no longer had to rely on the intricate platforming, jumps, spins, and slides to dispatch your enemies. Instead, you could simply stand at the edge of the screen, aim at the enemies, and blast them away one after the other. By the time Crash Bandicoot 4 It's About Time rolled over about a decade later than Crash 3, the OP Wumpa Fruit Bazooka was nowhere to be seen. Nope, instead the developers decided to go down the sadomasochistic route and make Crash 4 possibly the hardest game in the series, and yet they never thought that a bazooka would make for a suitable reward if you put up with all that collectible chasing in the first place. Still, we've got those fond memories of going back to every single standard on-foot level in Crash 3 and just using the bazooka to blast everything in sight. Good times. Number 7. The 5.7 Pistol. Splinter Cell Conviction / Blacklist. The 5.7 Pistol is a staple in the Splinter Cell series, appearing in many of the earlier titles and rapidly becoming a bit of a fan favorite. Then came along Splinter Cell Conviction and Blacklist, upending the way things used to be. See, in Conviction, this trusty 5.7 was adapted to the new Mark and Execute mechanic, letting you auto-target up to 4 enemies with an attached reflex scope. Hit one button and just take them all out. Obviously, this became a bit OP, as you just wipe entire rooms in one go, over and over again. So in Splinter Cell Blacklist, Ubisoft nerfed the weapon down to just 3 auto kills instead. While Sam Fisher, Splinter Cell's stealthy, shadowy green goggle enthusiast, is no doubt a damn good spy and killer, the ability to take down 4 people at the same time is just a smidge too overpowered, making the game a lot easier than it probably should be. This skill was damn fun to use though. Hopefully in the recently announced continuation of the Splinter Cell series, they can take pity on us and give us the trusty 5.7 pistol we all deserve and need. Number 6. M6D Personal Defense Weapon, Halo Combat Evolved. When is a pistol not a pistol? Well, when it basically functions as a sniper rifle as well as a pistol. If you cast your mind back to the original Halo Combat Evolved, remember how ridiculously OP that original pistol was. It was a marvelous machine, capable of everything from close quarters combat to shooting enemies from across the map. It was an absolute powerhouse, and to be quite honest, you could probably have played through the entire game using just the M6D. If you're playing multiplayer though, the pistol is perhaps the best overall weapon in the game. No matter what situation you find yourself in, this M6D personal defense weapon system has got you covered. In Halo 2 then, the original pistol was replaced by the Magnum. While this had decent stopping power, it lacked the oomph of the original firearm, and was nowhere near as effective against shields as the original one was. This could though be rectified by dual wielding Magnums, as Halo 2 introduced that mechanic instead. Number 4. M488 Portable Nuke. Just Cause 3. Just Cause has always been known for over-the-top action and ridiculous weaponry alongside some crazy traversal mechanics. However, Just Cause 3's M488 launcher might well be the most over-the-top weapon in the entire series. The launcher is essentially your typical rocket launcher, but it's instead equipped with a miniature nuclear-style warhead fueled by the material bavarium, which is a big plot point in Just Cause 3. In practice though, this gives you a massively overpowered weapon with the ability to cause explosions filled with crackling electricity. The explosive capabilities of the M488 are so massive that all other weapons pale in comparison. After launch, you can expect the M488 to produce an explosion that's 20 to 30 meters in diameter and up to 40 meters tall. Whatever you hit with it will be vaporized instantly, regardless of whether they're a person, a vehicle, or even a building. It can even destroy an entire outpost instantly if you're tactical enough with when you deploy. All of this is to say that the weapon is nowhere to be seen in Just Cause 4, replaced by the likes of the wind gun, because weather is a big part of Just Cause 4 overall, but there's no return to electricity-stocked nukes. Number 3. The Galahorn, Destiny. In the original Destiny, there was one weapon that completely dominated the game's endgame activities for a significant amount of time. That weapon was the Galahorn, the exotic rocket launcher, which was so powerful it was for a time completely impossible to complete certain higher game activities without it. Many games even had Galahorn required on their listings, otherwise people would kick you from the servers. In practice, this rocket launcher was an extremely effective, high damage and high accuracy weapon that could be used at all ranges. It was capable of felling most enemies extremely quickly and made bosses significantly easier too. The Galahorn's dominance in the game's endgame content forced Bungie's hand though, and it was quietly pulled from sale to ensure that other weapons had a chance to be used, keeping games accessible to all players. It returned later in Destiny 2 but was significantly nerfed compared to its original incarnation. And number 1, the Metal Blade, Mega Man 2. The Mega Man series gives you plenty of powers to play around with, and generally a boss is weak to one of these powers. However, in the case of Mega Man 2, the Metal Blade is so overpowered it's actually the weakness of multiple bosses, including the boss that you take it from. The Metal Blade barely uses any energy, can fire in all 8 directions, moves very fast, and is extremely damaging against a lot of the enemies across the game. Given Mega Man 2's extremely high level of difficulty the first time you play through, having access to a weapon like the Metal Blade can be a saving grace for new players. The weapon has appeared again in the Mega Man series in various forms, but it's generally wielded by enemies and you don't get access to it, as it kinda breaks the whole progression of any individual installment.
A really powerful weapon can make any game extra fun. There's something incredibly satisfying about finding an item that allows you to breeze through hordes of enemies or take down a huge boss with just a couple of swings of your new and flashy toy. However, not every amazing weapon starts off incredibly strong. Some are pretty inconspicuous and seem like they're absolute trash, but if you invest in them, they can become really great. Weapons like this can offer far more enjoyment than an overpowered item you get right off the bat. Turning them into something useful or unique is a whole journey of its own, and it helps you get attached to your weapon of choice as you beat the whole game. I'm Jess from What Culture, and here are 10 video game weapons with hidden potential everyone missed. Number 10. Shotgun, Resident Evil 4. The base shotgun you find at the beginning of Resident Evil 4 is a useful weapon early on, but it easily gets outclassed by most of the guns you get access to later in the game. It doesn't have the same stagger effect that the other shotguns get, and its poor range fails in comparison to the riot gun. Because of this, most players decide to replace the shotgun with a different model of gun as quickly as they can. If for some reason you do decide to keep the shotgun though, you might be shocked to learn that its final upgrade makes it supremely powerful. The game doesn't explain this well, stating that the upgrade, quote, significantly increases the destructive power of the weapon for long distance targets. In reality though, what the upgraded shotgun will do is that if any enemy gets hit by any of the stray bullets you shoot at them, they'll take damage as if they got hit by all the bullets. The perk makes the shotgun incredibly effective against groups of enemies at short and medium range, and pretty much negates its inability to stagger enemies at a long distance too, as even chip damage will instantly put them down. Number 9. Muramasa, Castlevania Symphony of the Night. At a first glance, the Muramasa sword does not seem like it's your best choice for Castlevania Symphony of the Night. It reduces your attack and defense quite a bit, and its special ability, which heals Alucard with the blood of his enemies, is shared with Gurthang, which has significantly better stats. On top of that, the weapon can jam and cause Alucard to miss entirely. However, Muramasa has a secret gimmick that can actually turn it into the most powerful weapon in the game. This sword scales every time Alucard uses its healing ability. Muramasa accumulates points with every use of this ability, and with enough points, it levels up its attack. Each new upgrade requires more points, and in order for Muramasa to reach its peak potential of plus 999 attack, you have to trigger its ability a whopping 1 million times. Number 8. Frying Pan, Fable. On the surface, the frying pan from Fable doesn't look like much. It has a low damage output, and it's a pan with a creepy face etched on the bottom. Actually, it doesn't even look like it'd be good for cooking, if we're honest, but in the hands of a competent spellcaster, it's actually a powerful tool for destruction. The pan can be obtained via a treasure hunting quest after finding 6 treasure clues that will lead the player to it. Those who find the pan may be disappointed by its low damage output, but the pan actually has a few tricks up its handle. The pan has 4 augment slots, which is pretty significant on its own. The number can go up to 5 as the player can use an additional unseen slot by putting 5 augments in the pan at the same time without exiting the menu. This actually means the pan has more slots than any other weapon in the game. You can use them as you like, but by filling them with mana augmentations, you can turn yourself into a powerhouse of a mage that's never gonna have to pause while casting spells. Number 7. Paddle Ball. Fallout 4. The Nuka World DLC introduced plenty of wacky weapon choices to Fallout 4, and of course, the paddle ball. Now, on their own, of course, these toy weapons don't really do any significant damage, and they're mostly just used as a reminder that the raider-infested Nuka World used to be a theme park for kids. However, after visiting Nuka World's bottling plant and delving deep into its secret lab, the player is able to obtain the schematics for a military project that sought to weaponize the signature Nuka-Cola. The schematics allowed the player to upgrade the Thirst Sapper to shoot nuclear projectiles, but also, unbeknownst to most players, unlocked new upgrades for the paddle ball. The schematics description doesn't mention this, but they also include a recipe for a new paddle ball dipped in the nuclear cola. The strongest version of this paddle ball was capable of taking down a Mirelurk Razor Claw in just a couple of hits, making it more than just a rare collectible for your settlement. Number 6. The Model Gun. Dirge of Cerberus, Final Fantasy VII. The Final Fantasy series is no stranger to the concept of joke weapons. Final Fantasy VII had a whole set of joke weapons made for all the main characters of the game. However, it was Dirge of Cerberus, the series' take on shooter games, that took that concept to a whole new level by allowing the player to turn one of its joke toy guns into an Ultima weapon. The model gun is, as the name implies, literally just a model of a gun, and its damage output of 1 really gets that point across. That said, just like any other gun in the game, the model gun can also be modified, and although the gun doesn't really get all that much better with the first 2 upgrades, the final upgrade of the gun is well worth its mind-boggling price. By spending 200,000 gil on the model gun's final upgrade, the player can transform it into an Ultima weapon. The price tag on the weapon is going to require you to spend hours grinding and searching for gold bars, but the stats on this thing are totally worth the trouble. Number 5. M1911. Call of Duty Zombies. The debates regarding the best weapons in Call of Duty Zombies can get very heated, and with such a wide arsenal at the player's disposal, some rifles can really feel underrated or underutilized by the rest of the community. One weapon in particular, the M1911, you start with in the Zombies mode in Call of Duty Black Ops 2. It's definitely underrated, but only because most players haven't stuck with it long enough to discover its true destructive potential. Being a starter weapon, it doesn't do a lot of damage, and most players will just discard it as soon as a better option presents itself. However, those who keep the M1911 long enough to bring it to a Pack-a-Punch, the machine in the game that can upgrade any weapon, will be rewarded with one of the most powerful upgrades in the game. After receiving the Pack-a-Punch treatment, the M1911 turns into 2 guns called Mustang and Sally that shoot explosive bullets. That's right, this little pistol can be turned into 2 compact grenade launchers that have deadly aim and a massive impact radius. And to think, most people will just throw it away for the first shotgun in sight. Number 4. The Wrench. BioShock. Although BioShock offers the player a wide range of guns to choose from, the same cannot be said about melee weapons. The only choice the player has is the wrench they find at the start of the game, and at first glance, its low damage and limited range aren't anything to write home about. However, with the right tonics and plasmids, the wrench can actually become one of the best and most fun weapons in the game. To start off, you can use a few tonics to significantly boost the wrench's damage and speed. This will turn it into a considerable damage dealer, but this isn't even where the real fun begins. When an enemy is unaware or hit with an electro bolt, the damage the wrench does to them is quadrupled. Combine this with tonics that allow you to stun enemies and move more quietly when wielding the wrench, and all of a sudden you can sneak up on most enemies in the game and one-shot them like it was nothing. The wrench build is not only stupidly powerful, but it also makes for a fun alternative to the gun-toting way you generally go through a BioShock game. Number 3. Dawnguard Rune Axe. Skyrim. Although most weapons in Skyrim can be infinitely upgraded via the enchanting and alchemy exploit, there aren't many that can scale on their own. One example of such a weapon would be the Daedric Ebony Sword, which gets more powerful with each companion and friendly person you kill. Let's be honest though, who in their right mind wants to kill off all your friendly NPCs in Skyrim? I mean, They're the ones carrying all your loot. Perhaps a better alternative would be the undead hordes plaguing Skyrim's landscape, and this is where the Dawnguard rune axe comes in handy. The weapon can be obtained in one of the side missions for the Dawnguard faction, and its enchantment allows it to scale its magical damage with each undead creature you kill. The count of the undead slain can go beyond 100, but the catch is it resets with every dawn. Well, except there is a way to keep the scaling permanent. After killing enough undead, you can upgrade the axe at a grinding stone and lock the weapon's undead count. Now you can enjoy all the damage you've accumulated regardless of the time of day. Number 2. Wooden Sword, Ninja Gaiden. The wooden sword from Ninja Gaiden for the Xbox 360 was the most time-consuming and expensive weapon to upgrade. Was the case because the weapon was strong and each upgrade made it even more powerful? No, of course not. It's a wooden training sword. However, this useless little item could be transformed into something truly powerful, if not somewhat ridiculous looking. After purchasing the sword from Muramasa and upgrading it 7 times, the wooden sword was changed into a giant ore adorned with glowing red symbols called Unlabored Flawlessness. The weapon stats were significantly better than the sword it was made from, and it came stacked with a bunch of useful and unique abilities. It could deal twice as much damage when the player was low on health, and perform special attacks such as aerial strikes and the powerful Izuna drop, despite being classed as a heavy weapon. The only downside to Unlabored Flawlessness was that it was really slow. But then again, after making quick but pointless jabs with your wooden sword for so long, a wide and heavy swing of your instant death all was pretty satisfying. Number 1. Sword Hilt, Dark Souls. From Software games are full of weapons that all have unique mechanics and attributes that make all of them feel special. However, some weapons may seem weaker than others, and in the case of the straight sword hilt, a literal hilt of a broken weapon, the item is just completely useless. That is until you learn how to forge it into one of the most powerful swords in the game. In the original Dark Souls, instead of buying the weapons of defeated bosses with their souls like you do in other games, you first had to upgrade a weapon 10 times, and then infuse it with the soul to ascend it to its new form. In the case of Sif's soul, the fan favorite good boy, the infusion would result in the creation of the cursed greatsword of Artorias, a powerful weapon but not at its full potential. Only 2 weapons allow the infusion to transform the soul into the proper, non-cursed variant of Artorias' sword, the straight sword hilt and the broken straight sword. And yes, that basically means the trash you picked up super early in the game is actually the key to getting the most powerful blade in Dark Souls.
Hello all of you beautiful people, Jules here for WhatCulture.com, and as we all know, sometimes a video game hero is only as good as the weapons at their disposal, as all this bluff and bluster isn't going to mean much if you're taking on the devil himself with naught but a spoon, and not their superpowered oversmithed spoons from Skyrim. Therefore, it's in the developer's best interest to kit out the player with tools and equipment to help them save the day as best they can, and while it's rare for games to dole out their best kit in the early hours, come the close of a title, you'll likely be carrying with you enough guns and explosives that even Neo from the Matrix would say, whoa. Yet, with the ever-present shadow of video game sequels being cast on the experience, sometimes devs have to take our favourite toys away from us in order to earn them all over again. And in some rare cases, they'll even scrap the weapon entirely, meaning you've got fewer options overall. So let's take a look at them. As I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are 8 amazing video game weapons that were dropped in the sequels. Number 8, Battlefield 2042, the Ace 23, and many, many more. Now, as of the time of recording this, the latest entry into the established and much-loved Battlefield franchise is not faring as well as the devs nor the publisher EA would have hoped. With big changes to the overall formula, fans are rightly pointing out that Battlefield 2042 seems to be chasing trends rather than setting them and providing a rather anemic shooter experience as it goes, and the less said about the myriad of bugs the better. Yet, one facet that has truly caught flack from the fans has been its weapons, or more specifically, the lack of them, with the game only presenting a meager armory of 22 items at launch. And when you consider that Battlefield 4 launched with over 70 death-dealing items and support bits as well, this just smacks of a title holding onto the best guns until it can find a way to charge you for them. Fans expecting to wield the likes of the Ace 23 from Battlefield 4 will be sorely disappointed, as not only is this gun absent, which I guess is excusable because of the time shift between titles, but its closest cousin, the AC-42, is utterly useless by comparison, offering less accuracy, more recoil, and and lower damage. Cheers for that. Number 7. Batman Arkham Knight, the Shock Gloves. I think the only thing more frustrating than knowing you can't get Batman to wield the incredibly powerful Shock Gloves from Arkham Origins within the Rocksteady trilogy Caped Crusader Kappa Arkham Knight is actually finding the gloves within the latter title and having to witness Batman refuse to use them. That's right, the most powerful weapon or fist upgrade is in Arkham Knight, but thanks to his warped sense of wanting to take on goons with a bit more of a challenge, Juicy Bruce here denies the player the joy of ramping up the amps and giving goons a shocking surprise. Part of this might be down to how overpowered this upgrade was in Arkham Origins, but couldn't they at least be an unlock for New Game Plus to add a bit of superpowered levity to the otherwise pretty dour tone of the game? Instead, all we got was a reminder of how good we had it in the prequel and the added salt rub in the wound by Batman turning his nose up at an easy fight. Oh, too good for these, are you? But you were happy to use all of your other ridiculous gadgets though in a battle, weren't you, mate? Number 6. Crackdown 2, the agency vehicle upgrades. Now, usually I'd not consider a car a weapon, even though in the hands of some drivers it most certainly could be, but when it comes to Crackdown, these beasts were truly the masters of the road. In the original Crackdown, the player could level up their driving skill by performing tight turns, drifts, and catching such sick air that those at the World Health Organization were on the bloody phone. And by doing so, their agency vehicle would begin to transform around them. This was easily one of the purest pleasures of this game, getting behind the wheel and watching your chosen vehicle bang a whole load of roids, expanding in size, and even developing new weapons or abilities. A personal favourite was the scoop on the agency's supercar, as it now allowed you to fling other cars into the air. However, what brought the experience crashing down was Crackdown 2's choice to remove this evolution feature, and instead reward the player with preset cars at certain levels. This had a knock-on effect of some of the features of these super vehicles being split across others, meaning that while you still had rolling death fortresses, it wouldn't have guns and a hover feature, but either guns or a hover feature. Rubbish, right? Therefore, while players had more choice in theory, they were actually getting less bang for their buck. Number 5. Halo 4 Dual Wielding. Now, what greater, or should that be worst, example is there of a game dropping amazing weapons than the move from Halo 3 to 4, which saw the entire double wielding feature scrapped entirely? What this meant for players is that while all of the guns you could use with this feature were technically present in the game, the custom loadouts that they would offer and the interesting plays you could create with them were gone entirely. A firm favourite of this mode, the Plasma Pistol and Needler, was an excellent 1-2 punch that removed shields and then turned enemies into pincushions. However, the devs thought that this changed the flow of the game drastically, as melee and grenade options aren't available while holding 2 guns, which is fine in theory, but in practice, that is a choice for the player to make, and therefore scrapping the idea meant that we actually had fewer combat options to play with. Number 4. Devil May Cry 4, Nevin and Other Devil Arms. The Devil May Cry series is no stranger to weird and wonderful weapons, but things definitely seem to hit their peak meme madness with Devil May Cry 3, which allowed Dante to wield all sorts of insane weaponry, such as a pair of twin swords that look like McCain's crinkle-cut oven chips, a set of boots and gauntlets that let you punch 7 bells out of enemies, and of course, the most ridiculous of all, Nevin, aka the Guitar of Doom. Unlocked after defeating the demon of the same name, Nevin is basically the most banter weapon in a collection of banter weapons, allowing the player to use the literal power of rock to smash opponents into dust. Also, it turned into a scythe, which was pretty cool. Therefore, it was a huge shame to see that the axe got the cut in subsequent titles, and even more insultingly, was hand-waved away as Dante having sold it and other devil arms to pay his bloody rent. Number 3. Splinter Cell Conviction, the Knife. Now, normally a humble knife wouldn't see the light of day on a list like this, because in all fairness, when it comes to video games, unless said blade is about 2 feet long, covered in Hot Topic goth tassels, and is able to butter evil onto the pavement in seconds, we tend not to even think about it. However, in a series that is so reliant on stealth, subterfuge, and this much Sam Fisher, it's certainly noticeable when it's not part of your inventory. Now, to Conviction's credit, the tone of the game shifted massively from its origins as a stealth action pioneer, as here Sam was much more out-and-out aggressive, taking down his prey with extreme prejudice in some cases. Subtlety is out of the window definitely seemed to be the message that Ubisoft was giving to the player, and yet, a lot of the encounters still revolved around Sam taking down groups of enemies without alerting them to his presence, and indeed, he was placed in situations where he'd break the necks of guards or incapacitate them in other ways, so I ask you, where was his signature artery opener? Number 2. Half-Life 2 Episode 2, the Supercharged Gravity Gun. If there is one thing even more embedded into the Half-Life franchise than Gordon Freeman and his spectacular crowbar, it is the almighty gravity gun, as thanks to Valve leaning fully into the physics-based fun that came with it, gamers young and old came to adore how gravity could be manipulated in brutal and hilarious ways. In fact, the only thing better than the regular gravity gun was being able to use a supercharged version of it in some areas in Half-Life 2 Episode 1, whereby the zero-point energy field manipulator was able to lift far heavier objects, fling them further, and had an extremely awesome bonus of being able to flat-out kill any organic matter that it was fired at, whilst also supercharging them so if they were flung into enemies, they too would explode. Now that is a lot of power to give to players, and as you can imagine, it was only doled out in short bursts. But what a rush it becomes in those segments, right? Easily topping out as being some of the best moments in the entire franchise. But this makes it all the sadder that Half-Life 2 Episode 2 ditches this version of the weapon entirely. You still get the regular gravity gun, but thanks to an event in the game, the power to overcharge is stripped entirely, meaning that those brief moments of true chaos are all we get. And number 1, all of the weapons. Mirror's Edge Catalyst. Oh dear, what's happened here? Now, with video game sequels, people expect, much like their film counterparts, for things to be bigger and better, which was certainly not the case when it came to Mirror's Edge Catalyst. The title ended up being a shallow reflection of the original across the board, making things feel substantially linear and phoned in. Yet the biggest crime of all, it was removing the ability to use any weapon in the game. Now, while the weapons on offer in the original were pretty standard fare in the grand scheme of things, being able to parkour over obstacles, slide under guards, and then quickly snatch guns out of their hands to use against them made even basic weapons awesome. I mean, after all, you just enacted your own mini-action movie stunt. How could that not be amazing? Well, Catalyst came along and ruined the fun by removing this ability to disarm and destroy entirely, making for situations where you felt restricted and even completely underpowered despite you having pulled off moves counter to that. It's a true shame that removing weapons entirely ended up shooting Catalyst in the foot.
Most video games have a highly coveted weapon that destroys anything in its path. Doom's BFG can turn a room full of demons into goo with a single blast. James Bond's golden gun will kill anyone with one shot. But there's another kind of weapon that often stands out in video games, and that's the cute one. These weapons aren't just put in as a joke though. They're deliberately adorable so the enemy will let their guard down, allowing the weapon to rip them to shreds. I'm Jess from What Culture, and here are 10 cute video game weapons that destroyed you. Number 10. A Leprechaun, Mortal Kombat 11. Mortal Kombat 11 introduced a new feature called consumables. By activating these artifacts before a match, your player can call upon all sorts of offensive and defensive accessories. Most of these items are exactly what you'd expect. When your opponent is causing you trouble, you can shoot a barrage of shurikens, a Tarkatan blade, or a bloodied sai. But if you want the luck of the Irish on your side, you can use a bloody clover to summon the Leprechaun. With the press of a button, this jolly fairy folk will stroll by or glide on a rainbow cloud, singing a jovial Gaelic tune. If the leprechaun touches the opposing combatant, the Celtic fairy unleashes a hoard of coins or drops a pot of gold on them, blasting them into the air. Not only does this cause devastating damage, it gives the player a chance to perform a free hit. Watching your opponent's face the first time you summon the leprechaun is priceless, since they have no idea what's in store for them when they come into contact with the Irish chap. Number 9. Patricia the Seal, Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity. In Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, you must play as multiple heroes from the Legend of Zelda franchise in order to destroy Ganon's forces. Each playable character wields a specific type of weapon. Link slices at his foes with swords, Mipha cuts through bokoblins with a spear, Revali strikes from afar with his bow. Now, some of the heroes use more unconventional weaponry. Maz, for example, pounds his enemies with bangles, and Hetsu fights with maracas. But the weirdest and cutest weapon belongs to the Gerudo chief, Makila Riju. Being a leader, Riju has access to an endless supply of swords, daggers, and spears. Nevertheless, she charges into battle armed with a sand seal called Patricia. Because of the bow in her hair and the way she pants like a dog, you just want to stroke the fuzzy munchkin. But Patricia isn't a mere pet. Since she's wrapped with a harness around Riju's arms, the Gerudo chief can swing her tusked friend around like a cannon or a catapult, killing enemies in an instant. Not only does Patricia's blubbery body protect her from harm, it allows her to crush anything she lands on. Number 8. Louis, Bomberman series. In the Bomberman series, our titular hero uses explosives to blast through labyrinth-like levels. In his adventures, Bomberman can pick up power-ups that give the player abilities like enhanced speed, a remote detonator, or extra bombs. But one of the best power-ups has to be the Louis. After hopping onto one of these space kangaroos, they'll help our hero any way they can. Even though these hopping critters look harmless, they're anything but. Depending on which Louis you use, he or she can kick bombs into enemies, jump over blocks, or punch foes into submission. The Magaroo Louis may be the cutest, for example, he's got a top hat for crying out loud, but he's also the most lethal. While riding this fluffy marsupial, he can line up 8 bombs in an instant, giving enemies little time to escape the blast. Because there's a Louis hidden in almost every level in multiplayer, it's fun, but terrifying, for you and your friends to scour the room relentlessly, knowing that the first person to find them will have a major advantage over their opponents. Number 7. Mr. Saturn, Smash Bros. Mr. Saturn is actually, we're not entirely sure. In the game he's debuted in, Earthbound, it's never explained what the heck this thing actually is. But if you ask anyone who's played the Smash Bros. Series, they'll tell you exactly what he is. A bloody nuisance. At first glance, Mr. Saturn looks like the most innocuous projectile, but when you throw him at your opponent, he still seems harmless since it has almost no effect when one comes into contact with the minuscule alien. But in the hands of an experienced player, Mr. Saturn is one of the best weapons in the franchise. If you hit an enemy with this guy normally, they'll sustain little damage. If you hurl the little extraterrestrial at your rival while they have their shield up, their armor will shatter. If this impact doesn't kill the player, they'll be stunned, allowing anyone nearby to wail on them with their most powerful smash attack. Novices may see Mr. Saturn as a pointless item, but anyone experienced with the game knows it's foolish to underestimate his power. Number 6. Starman, Mario Kart. The first devastating weapon that most gamers experienced was Starman from the Super Mario series. This dancing, beady-eyed star looks cute, but anyone who's played a Mario game, meaning everyone in the whole world pretty much, knows how unstoppable this power-up is. Not only will this collectible allow the player to survive any basic attack, they'll be able to annihilate almost any enemy with a mere touch. Even though it's fun to use Starman to charge into Goombas and Koopa Troopas, it's more enjoyable when you activate the power-up in the Mario Kart series. Using this item to crash into your friends when you're seconds away from the finish line has to be one of the most satisfying moments in all of gaming. Of course, it's also one of the most annoying if you happen to be on the receiving end. Even though Starman has played a role in Super Smash Bros., Mario Golf, and many other games centered around the Italian plumber, you only truly comprehend how destructive this item is in the Mario Kart series. Number 5. Cluck Shot, Gears of War 3. For some reason, the Gears of War franchise has a lot of Easter eggs involving chickens. In the third entry in the series, you can perform a series of specific tasks to battle a fire-breathing rooster made of gold. But the most famous secret in Gears of War 3 is the hen blasting gun, the Cluck Shot. Even though this weapon can only be acquired on the insane difficulty, obtaining it is totally worth it. It may look like the boom shot launcher, but this bad boy blasts chickens instead of bombs. Then again, this gun doesn't just fire ordinary chickens. I mean, they wouldn't be particularly effective against giant aliens, would they? Instead, the feathery friends that the Cluck Shot blasts are filled with explosives, rendering your target to a bloody paste on impact. Even though the Cluck Shot was a joke weapon, it became such a staple to the Gears of War series that it appeared in 2 follow-ups. If you ever fantasized about blowing up your foes with a combustible cockerel, and let's be honest, who hasn't, the Cluck Shot is the weapon for you. Number 4. The Pegasus, Dead Rising 2. When Dead Rising 2 hit shelves all the way back in 2010, the zombie action adventure received critical acclaim and sold millions. But after only a year, the studio released an updated version called Dead Rising 2 Off the Record. Although this incarnation had a number of additions, there was one that stood out above the rest. You can fight zombies with a riding stick Pegasus combined with a firework. By jamming the horse's head into a horde of the undead, you can watch them blast into the air like it's the 4th of July. It was obvious this was what was missing from the original DR2. Because of the series' meta humor, crazy characters, and ridiculous weapons, it's always been clear Dead Rising was not afraid to take the piss out of itself, and nothing emphasizes this fact more than the ability to kill a swarm of rotting zombies with a tool that looks like it came out of My Little Pony. The absurdity of the Pegasus riding stick was such a selling point for Dead Rising 2 Off the Record, it even received its own trailer. Number 3. The Mighty Ginginator, Banjo-Kazooie. In Banjo-Kazooie, the titular bear and bird need to collect 5 Gingos per level to obtain a Jiggy, which helps the pair advance to new levels. Considering the Jinjos look like a cross between a teddy bear and a dinosaur, you wouldn't think they'd be adorable. However, the Jinjos are the cutest guys in the game, which is a major achievement since Banjo-Kazooie is filled with all sorts of adorable creatures. Because they look and sound innocent, you'd never believe these fuzzy critters could hurt or fly, but nothing could be further from the truth. Not only are Jinjos tremendously powerful, they're crucial in defeating the final boss. As a thank you for saving them, the Jinjos will appear in your final confrontation with Gruntilda and launch themselves at the evil witch. In the closing phase of the battle, Banjo and Kazooie must awaken the Jinjo's leader, the mighty Jinjonator. He might look like a giant plushie, but the Jinjonator is the only one who can vanquish Gruntilda, making him the most powerful weapon in the game. Number 2. Mr. Toots, Red Faction Armageddon. No cute video game weapons list is complete without mentioning Mr. Toots from Red Faction Armageddon. Despite the fact this third-person shooter boasts dozens of weapons, such as grenade launchers, magnet guns, plasma cannons, there's no weapon more legendary than this little horsey. Simply put, Mr. Toots is a mini unicorn that shoots rainbow lasers from its butt. If caught in the blast, the enemy will implode into a bunch of butterflies and rainbows. Even though you can only use this powerhouse pony after completing the main storyline, it's an absolute must to try out. Even if it wasn't super cute and utterly ridiculous, Mr. Toots is so accurate and destructive, using him as your primary weapon makes the game a breeze. Based on the little chap's facial expression, Mr. Toots is clearly not a fan of being used as a weapon, although it is his own fault for making his butt lasers so devastating. After using the little unicorn for a while, you'd assume the novelty of it would wear off, but no! Even after eliminating 1,000 enemies with Mr. Toots, it's still hilarious watching a miniature unicorn hee-hawing while blasting rainbows from his ass. Number 1. Tonberry, Final Fantasy VII. Every Final Fantasy player remembers their first encounter with Tonberry. Because he's a tiny goblin armed with only a teeny-weeny knife, you naturally assume he's a minor foe that can be vanquished with one strike. But as Tonberry shrugs off your basic attacks, you start to get desperate and hit him with strong magic spells. As the unfazed enemy continues to advance towards you, you panic and hit him with your most devastating attacks, and maybe 1 or 2 power-ups you were saving for the final boss. Alas, it's all for naught, since nearly everyone dies the first time they face the wrath of Tonberry. Just to be clear, Tonberry's knife isn't the weapon, it's Tonberry who's the weapon. Each game in the franchise is filled with godlike swords and planet-destroying devices, and yet, there's nothing that fills the player with more dread than watching this cloaked critter shuffling towards you. Although fighting him is a nightmare, it's such a relief when you unlock him as a summon. Once you have Tonberry at your beck and call, it's tempting to use the Wee Nipper any chance you get, since he can kill most enemies with one swift doink. Some gamers love the feel of demolishing their favorite RPG, whilst others hate themselves for resorting to what they see as one step up from cheating. But there's no denying overpowered weapons are prevalent in almost every title. I'm Just from What Culture, and here are 10 overpowered weapons that broke RPGs. Number 10. Buster Sword, Final Fantasy VII. Undoubtedly one of the most iconic weapons in the Final Fantasy series, the Buster Sword is Cloud's default weapon in the 7th entry and its 2020 remake. What makes it one of the standout starter weapons in the game is how well-rounded its stats are, improving Cloud's durability as well as offering some impressive magic attack and attack power stats. The giant broadsword has an initial base stat of 22 in magic attack and attack power, with both being able to be perked up to a maximum of 91. It also carries with it abilities that grant a 10% boost to a player's MP regeneration and a 5% boost to their limit break damage. It also comes with a handy 96% base accuracy total, making it one of the best feeling entry-level RPG weapons. For players who might not know what sort of build they're looking to branch out into, there are few weapons as versatile as Buster Sword. Whilst it works as a versatile option for magic builds, its strengths probably just about make it a better option for those looking to focus on the melee side of things. Number 9. Leviathan Axe, God of War. The Leviathan Axe is a solid reminder that sometimes the most overpowered RPG weapons can be the ones that a player starts off their adventure with. The Leviathan axe is Kratos' main offensive weapon in God of War, and was designed to be kinda like an anti-Mjolnir, as the player prepares to go against the Nordic god Thor. But whilst the lore behind the weapon is undoubtedly badass, where the axe drifts into the overpowered category is in how players are able to constantly upgrade it as they progress through the game. With 6 unique levels, the Leviathan axe has several runes across its handle that allow it to be infused with different powers, such as ice effects through frozen flames or the ability to have it recalled from anywhere on the map. The blade also has slots for 2 runic attacks to be placed, a heavy and a light, and it can be upgraded even further with the weapon's blade being made bigger in exchange for a frozen flame. Out of all the weapon's wide range of attacks, the Leviathan's Fury is undoubtedly the one that will make players feel like a true god, dealing a huge amount of explosive frost damage for the cost of just 175 runic. Number 8. Heavy Bowgun, Monster Hunter World. 2018's Monster Hunter World had some of the biggest monsters the series had ever served up following its release. However, a weapon like the heavy bowgun is exactly what players needed to even up the odds. The go-to choice for players looking to make a character build capable of dealing the maximum amount of damage. As the highest DPS weapon in the game, the heavy bowgun is at its best when it is relentlessly firing sustained ranged attacks, racking up the numbers and making mincemeat of an enemy's health bar. The weapon is slightly cumbersome to wield, taking 1 second to draw and 2 to put away. However, the benefits far outweigh those small frustrations. For starters, as well as packing the biggest punch in terms of damage, the weapon has a far larger ammo capacity than the light bowgun, and a much more manageable recoil despite its size. The heavy bowgun also has 1 more mod than the light bowgun and access to more powerful types of ammo. The heavy bowgun has become the face of Monster Hunter World, and is still the best weapon most builds choose to center their perks around when they want to feel like an absolute Terminator. Number 5. Uchigatana, Elden Ring. In a game with difficulty as notorious as Elden Ring, having a powerful weapon in their arms is an absolute necessity for players. Thankfully, Uchigatana is available right from the off, as the first katana players can pick up in the game. With a slash and pierce damage type and blood loss of 45 passive damage effects, the weapon is an incredibly versatile choice that a player can very easily have equipped for the bulk of their playthrough. Like with the other entry items on this list, Uchigatana is a very viable pick for players looking to scale either dexterity or strength. When combined with the Keen upgrade, the katana will be granted a 23+ scaling for dexterity, whilst a +23 scaling upgrade for strength will be applied with a heavy perk. The weapon can even be infused with Ashes of War, elevating it even further in our OP checklist. What's more, whilst the Uchigatana is the starting weapon for the samurai class, any class can pick it up at Death Touch Catacombs. Number 4. Lothric Knight Sword, Dark Souls 3. Dark Souls 3 is another game notorious for pulling no punches when it comes to its difficulty, but thankfully also has a number of weapons capable of making things far more manageable. Another weapon on this list that excels because of its versatility, the Lothric Knight Sword is an item any type of build can excel with. Easily obtained by farming Lothric Knights on the High Wall of Lothric, the weapon is one of only 2 in the game to have a 110 critical modifier, with the other being the short sword. As well as its critical modifier, the weapon also boasts a motion value of 220 on a backstab and 275 on a riposte. With its +10, it also has the potential for A and S tier scaling, with almost any infusion in the game. In total, the Lothric Knight Sword is capable of reaching anywhere between 215 and 275 overall damage for the different builds on offer, which, coupled with the incredible reach of the weapon, makes it a real fan favorite with players. Number 3. Sweet Katana, South Park: The Stick of Truth. Yes, we're back at it again with the cool katanas. As role-playing video games go, South Park: The Stick of Truth certainly has a wide range of options when it comes to the weapons and items on offer. Some builds can make the game feel like an absolute breeze, but the Sweet Katana still stands as the best melee weapon of choice. Unlike other weapons on this list, the Sweet Katana is by no means an entry-level weapon capable of picking up and running with from the get-go. Only available from level 14 onwards, it's purchasable from Jimbo's Guns for a whopping whopping $75, making it one of the most expensive items in the game. But it is absolutely worth every cent by standing as easily the best weapon out there. The Obsidian Shard perk is one of the most powerful effects, doing 30% more damage on every attack. The Rend perk attached to the weapon also has the ability to remove 200 armor on a perfect attack, helping to take out one of the most infuriating mechanics in the game. Number 2. CZ57 Avenger, Fallout New Vegas. One of the reasons why Fallout New Vegas has the cult following it still boasts today is due to its wide range of unique and charming weapons, which players can get their hands on. But none come close to matching the sheer power of the CZ57 Avenger. A variant of the standard railgun, the CZ57 Avenger is found in a blue truck in the Devil's Throat, and still stands as the most powerful weapon in the game. When maxed out with gun skills and perks, the Avenger is capable of producing a whopping 649.7 DPS rating. Obviously, wielding such a heavy item comes with certain drawbacks that some builds might be better steering clear of, the cumbersome mobility and reduced magazine size of 80 being the main two. Nevertheless, the weapon still comes with a high-speed motor mod already attached, and is far more accurate over long distances, making it more than a match for any foe found on the wastelands. Number 1. Geth Pulse Rifle, Mass Effect 2. There are a huge array of options for players in Mass Effect 2 when it comes to weaponry. Different guns have different characteristics, and the greater emphasis on making the game more of a third-person shooter can make some of those characteristics quite impactful. By far, the number 1 assault rifle in Mass Effect 2 is the Geth Pulse Rifle. This one is only obtainable by completing Tali's recruitment mission on either hardcore or insanity difficulty, but boy oh boy is this assault rifle worth getting a hold of. Firing a rapid stream of energy bolts, the assault rifle comes with a helpfully low recoil, a spare ammo capacity of up to 528, and is the absolute go-to when it comes to taking down shields. With a base damage of 10.8, the rifle gets a 1.15 times multiplier on armor, and a hefty 1.35 multiplier against shields and barriers. The Geth Pulse Rifle made an appearance in Mass Effect 3, but it seemed like BioWare came to their senses when developing it again, because they noticeably gave the weapon a pretty hefty nerf.
Hello all of you beautiful people, Jules here for WhatCulture.com. And you know what, as with any real-life weapon, the pokers, slashers and unholy prodders that you can find in video games should always be handled with care, as while you might be carrying enough firepower to turn a mountain into Swiss cheese, you might want to make sure that you're not accidentally in the blast radius. But you know what, that doesn't stop the weapon in question from being truly and utterly awesome. So let's take a look at them. As I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are 8 amazing video game weapons that killed you. Number 8. Soul Edge, Soul Calibur franchise. Ah, the Soul Edge, weapon of legend, power, and ultimate disaster for those that come against it. The tales of this mystical weapon stretch to the far corners of the world, drawing in those that would look to wield its mighty power, as well as those looking to destroy it in equal measure. Plus, it kind of looks like a big angry middle finger that was crossed with William Birkin from Resident Evil, so that's always a plus. However, I do think that this almighty weapon should come with a user instruction manual, as I'm pretty sure that at some point every player who's picked up this oversized letter opener fell prey to one of its more nasty attributes. You see, even though this weapon provides enough offense to level a city block, it does come at the cost of a constant stamina drain, and in any fighting game, this is never a good thing. From dying to opponents exploiting the drain and hitting you for constant chip damage, to dodging back and letting you quite literally fall on your own sword, the Soul Edge really can be as big a nightmare as its previous wielder. Still, when it hits, ooh baby does it clatter that brain matter out the other side of your opponent's head. Number 6. The Rotten Egg. Resident Evil 5. I think it's fair to say that when it comes to stressful situations, the scenario that Chris Redfield and Sheva find themselves in during Resident Evil 5 is pretty much at the top of the pile. Not only are there infected villagers looking to crack you open like a fleshy piñata, bioweapons the size of houses erupting from the blue everywhere you look, but you've also got to deal with the bloody partner AI hoovering up all your ammunition and healing items before looking at you like you've asked them the square root of something when you ask for a bandage to stop you from bleeding out. Anyway, I digress. It's a stressful time for sure is what I'm trying to say. But that being said, the game does offer up one awesome moment of hilarity in the form of the almighty rotten egg, an item that you can find randomly in the game world from time to time. Now what makes this yolk weapon so brilliant is that if you manage to hit an enemy with it, it's a one-hit kill, meaning that if you're willing to chance your arm, you've effectively got a get-out-of-jail-free card at your disposal. However, be warned, this ovum of doom is a bit of a double-edged sword, as if you happen to press the wrong button, you'll end up eating the rotter and downing yourself in the process. Oh well, hopefully AI Shavu will help me out. No, she's just content doing her own thing, it seems. Number 5. The Overpowered Caber. Team Fortress 2. In a game as chaotic as Team Fortress 2, the sound of gunfire, explosions and screaming could basically be sold to fans of the title as relaxing white noise, as there's really not a moment of true silence on offer here. And thanks to an incredible array of weaponry at your disposal, there's always a new threat to look out for, from rocket jumping soldiers looking to clatter you with trench shovels to snipers throwing their own piss at you. The over-the-top violence takes many wacky forms. And speaking of whacking, the Overpowered Caber for the Demo Man is truly an almighty one, seeing as this melee weapon is actually just a live stick grenade. However, instead of throwing said explosives, the Demo Man will look to batter his opponents more than Scottish cuisine, and with its insane damage output might well just do so in one hit. However, there is one slight drawback here, and that is, of course, the fact that you're hitting an opponent with a live grenade on a stick, and it's going to catch you in its blast radius when it pops. Therefore, the Overpowered might end up dragging both you and your opponent into the great beyond, and leaving nothing but meaty chunks behind for your team to clear up. Number 4. The Voodoo Doll. Blood. When it comes to the video game Blood, it sure does spill a hell of a lot of it with its ridiculous weapons list. From jackhammer shotguns with enough recoil to push you back through a wall, to a Vulcan minigun that chews through ammo at a frightening rate, you can go toe-to-toe with the forces of the dead and laugh as you mow down enemies in short order. That being said, if you really do want to stick the needle into your enemies, then why not do literally that with the Voodoo Doll that you can find in the game? The gimmick here is that instead of aiming and unleashing your own personal version of hell, you can simply send enemies right to its gates by jabbing the doll in front of you. Thanks to its unlimited range and lack of aiming requirements, the Voodoo Doll is supremely powerful in the right hands. However, you better watch your own pinkies, because if there are no enemies on screen and you press the attack button, you'll miss and end up doing catastrophic damage to yourself. Therefore, it's quite possible in the hectic battles that emerge in the late game to feel like a right prick as you jab a needle into your own hand and go down like a sack of spuds. Number 3. Devil Weapons, the Fire Emblem franchise. So we all know the expression, don't deal with the devil, right? A backhanded warning and condemnation of those that associate with less than reputable people. And this is a mantra that should always be kept in mind when playing through the Fire Emblem titles, as the devil weapons that you find here are no joke, but at the same time might end up having a laugh at your expense. This is because while the stat lines for the devil axe and sword, plus the numerous cursed weapons that you can find in the franchise all rock insane damage output, each comes with a pretty hefty cost. For you see, whenever you attack with these weapons, the game performs a skill check, and depending on your luck skill, you have around a 20 to 30% chance of the attack not just missing, but hitting you. And we're not talking about a weak slap to remind you who's the boss, we're talking about a full or even critical hit that may well one-shot your own party member. It's a gamble and a half, as while it's always nice to pie off an enemy, it's much less so when you've ended up slicing your own face off. Number 2. The Kill Star. Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon. Okay, so who was the genius that decided to exploit my love of death lasers and the almighty so bad it's brilliant movie Krull in the form of Far Cry 3's amazing Blood Dragon expansion? Was it you, Jeff? No? Well, it's got your fingerprints all over this bad boy. In an experience as over-the-top and utterly insane as Blood Dragon, you're going to need to do something pretty special in order to stand out as a weapon. And the Kill Star, well, it's very special indeed, as not only does it look absolutely amazing as it spins around like a Beyblade of Doom, but when it comes to letting it rip, it shoots off a death laser which will punch a hole through even the toughest defenses. However, there is one slight drawback here, and that's that the ammunition for the Kill Star is your own life essence, making for a horrible situation where you have to choose whether to fire this awesome arm-mounted mad lad or, stay alive. It's like Sophie's Choice. I can't decide when the weapon is this cool. And number 1, the Boomerang. Don't Starve. So Don't Starve, as the name might suggest, isn't exactly a title that is a nice frolic over a field 90% of the time. With almost perpetual darkness coating the title, a gloomy atmosphere, and of course, the myriad of monsters that view your stomach as an all-you-can-eat buffet, death and despair are pretty much par for the course. However, just because you're literally fighting for your life at every turn doesn't mean the game keeps you perpetually underpowered when it comes to weapons. The glass cutter, the morning star, the almighty ham bat. All of these and more can be yours, and each does a mighty job of making your odds of surviving another night that much greater. However, something even cooler than a literal slab of meat being your weapon, Don't Starve also gives you access to the brilliant boomerang. This ranged weapon can clobber enemies from a distance and has the lovely added bonus of coming back to you to use again and again. Well, that is if you remember to catch it, that is. For you see, if you don't press the action button as it comes back around, it'll clonk you in the head, causing a fair amount of damage, thereby making for a very cool weapon that is possibly the last thing that you'll see as it sends you 6 feet down under. Crikey.
We often talk about how there's no right way to play video games, and while that remains true, there are things we can do that make us feel like we're pulling them off better than your average gamer. These are things like crossing off generally unattainable achievements, hitting impressive leaderboard standings, or obtaining weapons that few players have managed to get their hands on. That last one is what we're focusing on today, as there are more than a handful of weapons that seldom find their way into even the most dedicated RPG players' inventories. If you've ever counted yourself among the lucky owners of any of the following, you can color us genuinely impressed. I'm Jess from What Culture, and here are the 10 rarest RPG weapons ever. Number 10. The Pendulum of Doom, World of Warcraft. Despite sounding like an amulet to the uninitiated, I can promise you that not only is this item an axe, it's extremely rare, so we're all good. A Reddit post from user Poral went viral 2 years ago where they described running Uldaman for no less than 3.5 years grinding for this one weapon. That amounted to 2,000 runs on retail and 292 runs on Classic WoW, which is mind-boggling. This thing has a ludicrously low drop rate, and due to it being extremely rare, it's even almost always sold out on real money auction houses. It didn't used to be so hard to get your hands on, but when Blizzard rescaled a handful of mob levels for Cataclysm, they incidentally removed almost all of the mobs that were in the right range to drop the weapon, making it even harder to farm for. Plenty more gamers have stories about giving up on grinding for this one than those who've actually obtained it, so if you have managed to fall into that second category, that's a real badge of honor. Number 9. The Explosive Flamer, Fallout 76. From a weapon that's tricky to obtain because the guys who drop it were made extinct, to a weapon that was itself made extinct, we've got the Explosive Flamer from Fallout 76. That's right, a rare weapon from that one Fallout game you didn't play. Let's talk about it. This weapon is now technically legacy because Bethesda removed it from the game and deemed it illegal, alongside their decision to remove explosive attachments from legendary energy or plasma weapons. Because this is an online game, Bethesda are cracking down hard on hacked and modded weapons, even though the perks were totally legal when they were initially dropped. In its heyday, the Explosive Flamer was particularly desirable for its speed, fuel capacity, stopping power, range, and silent assault. While a lot of players decided that it was overpowered and broken, this just made plenty more players want it all the more. Curiously, this created a black market on the side, where players were willing to part with real-world money to get their hands on one, especially when Bethesda blacklisted them and just nerfed the non-hacked versions into shadows of their former explodey selves. Number 8. Celebrant Sickle, Elden Ring. As a brutal open-world RPG, Elden Ring is just stacked with fearsome foes waiting to best you, and a bunch of gear and weapons designed to help you get the upper hand on them. Of course, not all weapons are readily available, because that would just make things way too easy. There's a large list of rare weapons we could throw onto this list, many with chillingly low drop rates, but we've gone with a classic, the Celebrant Sickle. What makes this admittedly low damage output weapon so rare is that it has a drop rate of around 0.5%, and it's only dropped by 2 dudes across the game world. It's not overly tricky to farm for, as they drop from celebrants who would really rather you don't stab them to death, so they're not going to put up much of a fight. But that drop rate is still going to make trying to get one of these things a huge grind. Because it's all a bit of a luck game though, you may have picked up one of these but had a bitch of a time trying to get the Celebrant's Rib Rake or the Celebrant's Cleaver. One thing's for sure though, farming for anything with an exceedingly low drop rate is gonna take you a hell of a lot of time. Though the Celebrant Sickle has fairly low damage output, its passive gives you 10 runes for each successful hit, which is nothing to turn your nose up at. So it's a prize worth offering a bunch of blue robe wearing, dagger wielding celebrants for if you're up for the challenge. Number 7, the Grandfather, Diablo 4. Being the newest entry on our list, the rarity of items and weapons in Diablo 4 is a hot topic that is constantly changing and evolving. And while we don't expect that to change, this one still tops a lot of lists. The two-handed sword entitled the Grandfather can be used by any class, and it consists of enviable stats, including between approximately 2,000 and 3,000 damage per hit, 1 attack per second, 35% critical strike damage, an additional 28 to 56% damage, a huge bonus to your maximum life, ignoring durability loss on death, and an additional 40 to 72 points to all of your stats. On top of all that, its legendary aspect increases your critical strike damage by 60 to 100%. While all of these stats depend on the luck of the drop, you have to be very fortunate to see this thing drop in the first place, as it was only very recently that a player confirmed having received it online. The first player to confirm having received one online was a Chinese player who'd already hit level 100 and got it from a Helltide chest. So if you're already grinding Helltides, you're on the right track. Number 6, Satan Grab Bow, Final Fantasy XII. I'm gonna be honest, some of the weapons on this list don't look cool enough to stack up to what an incredible headache they are to obtain. Not this weapon though, this weapon looks sick, but it's still an absolute bitch to contain because it spawns in an invisible chest. Yes, you heard that one right. Hilariously, even if you can find this chest, there's only a 1% chance of it appearing at all. And even if it does appear, there's an 80% chance it'll contain Diddly Squat, and a 5% chance that it will have this specific previously mentioned admittedly cool looking bow. That's not math I can do, but I know it's not looking good for you. Square Enix at least took pity on you and made it way easier to get the bow in the remaster, but before that, you were just praying to RNGesus, doing your best RNG manipulation tactics, and hoping for the best to get your hands on this thing. Number 5, the Cobra, Borderlands 2. One of the main selling points of Borderlands games is that there are lots and lots and lots of guns. Of course, with that many guns, there is an understanding that there'll be common guns and ones that are an absolute pain in the ass to obtain. Falling into that second category is the Cobra, a unique aftermarket sniper rifle that you can only obtain as a rare drop from any biker of Pete's Burners in the Mr. Torgue's Campaign of Carnage DLC. Gearbox did eventually improve the drop rate to 8%, but before that, if you were hoping to grab the weapon with purple rarity, you had an 0.88% chance of seeing that happen. This is before you even factor in that you have to roll a rare weapon. That rare weapon needs to roll as a sniper, specifically a Torgue sniper, and that needs to roll with the Cobra barrel that makes it unique. And it only drops from one specific type of enemy in a specific section of the game. All that said, it does have an 80% splash and 110% crit bonus. Any dedicated Borderlands 2 player will tell you this is an absolute headache to get your hands on, but as a fan of explosive sniper rifles myself, I'm looking at you, Cyberpunk 2077's 05, I respect the grind. Number 4, Elton Brand, The Elder Scrolls IV Morrowind. If you were betting there was a good chance we weren't going to make it to the end of this list without an entry from the Elder Scrolls series, you would have won that bet, and this one is a doozy. Morrowind features a sword called Goldbrand that you can obtain as a reward from Boethia, the Daedric Prince of Deceit, after completing his quest to reinstate his shrine. You can, however, transform this fancy golden longsword into an upgraded version called Elton Brand. In order to have Goldbrand upgraded into Elton Brand, you need to be a vampire when you talk to the High Elf Nightblade, Cyrilonwe, who will then send you off to kill a Dark Elf mage called Shashev, after which you can obtain his key. If you happen to have this key when you're doing Boethia's quest, and you have exactly 11,171 gold in your inventory when you have the conversation to turn in the quest, you'll run a script that reads, "Go to Hell Carolina" on the screen, and you'll get this new sword instead of Goldbrand. If you're extraordinarily confused by what just happened, but happy that you now have a sword with way better stats, let me give you the short version. Basically, NBA basketball player Elton Brand was a favorite of Bethesda dev Mark Nelson. His birthday correlates with that very specific amount of gold, and their rivals were the North Carolina Tar Heels. So there you go. Number 2, Mirror of Calandra, Path of Exile. So technically the Mirror of Calandra isn't exactly a weapon, but it can be, and look, to be fair, the first entry on this list isn't exactly an RPG, but it kind of is, so I'm playing it real fast and loose at the tail end here, but trust me, hearing about these two is worth it. To be super technical about it, the Mirror of Calandra is in fact a currency item, but it can be used to duplicate any piece of non-unique equipment or non-corrupted item that is not itself a duplicate, so it has full potential to be a weapon if you want it to be. What makes this item so special, apart from its primary usage, is it's incredibly rare. It's been calculated you'd have to run about 500,000 maps to try to get one mirror, as its drop rate is about 0.0001%. That makes it almost the lowest drop rate for any piece of gear on this list that we know definitely exists in a game. That's right, I found one even lower. Number 1, Fate of All Fools, Destiny. Destiny has loads of particularly rare guns across the original and the sequel, but indisputably the rarest is the Fate of All Fools, and that's because Bungie only made one of them. Does that mean I kind of cheated with my number 1 entry on this list? Yeah, I sort of did, but the shoe fits, so let's talk about it. The reason only one of these exotic scout rifles was made is that it was gifted to a player for mental health therapy while he was recovering from brain surgery. The gun was later rebranded to the Jade Rabbit, a version that would drop for other players, but since the Fate of All Fools only exists as a singular gun in the Destiny-verse, that means it has a drop rate of 0.0%, making it the rarest weapon on this list.